Reborn in the empire where the sun never sets to become a pirate. Greetings, fellow multiversal adventurers. It's an honor to have you back in this saga that has us all hooked. Official channel statement: this story is 100% epic fiction, so please don't attempt real magic. The results aren't guaranteed and insurance won't cover it. The rights to this masterpiece belong entirely to its brilliant original author. We are just a barge sharing it with you. Do you want to keep being part of this amazing community? Join our ninja army of subscribers on YouTube and give this content a like. And for true fans, our Patreon has exclusive ninjutsu waiting for you. Chapter 26, Viking Sword, Finnish Knife. Scandinavia boasts a long history of ironwork, and its swords are renowned throughout Europe for their sharpness and exquisite craftsmanship. Finnish knives and Viking swords are particularly renowned, each with its own distinct characteristics. Lorraine, Hina, and Piers, dressed in loose, casual clothing, chatted and laughed as they strolled through the quiet alleys of a sword shop in the harbor area. Northern Europe is mountainous and sparsely populated, with most streets and alleys nestled against the hillsides, a stark contrast to the densely populated Western Europe. Stavanger's Black Harbor is no exception. Wide alleys paved with scattered bluestone floors line the streets, and small, wooden, peaked buildings, their whitewashed walls and colorful roofs, evoke a fairy tale-like atmosphere. People are rare on the streets, and even when they are seen, they mostly keep a distance, greeting each other from a distance of 2 meters. Unless they know each other well, they rarely walk together. This makes Lorraine and his companions stand out, both loud and conspicuous. Walking and laughing, they stopped in front of a shop called Martini and Espet, rang the bell, and pushed open the glass door. The shop was empty. The place was cluttered with exquisite swords. The owner, basking in the sun in the sunny front yard, didn't even bother to greet customers even when they entered. In Northern Europe, this was the epitome of warm hospitality. Lorraine and the other two began to browse. The shop boasted a dazzling array of weapons, knives, swords, shields, spears, axes, hammers, and hooks, each a favorite of Vikings, but the most eye-catching were their knives and swords. On the wall rack, Lorraine spotted 3 authentic Viking swords, forged from wood steel, double-edged with a central blood groove. They ranged in length from 70 to 90 centimeters, their blades clearly engraved with the inscription Ulfbert, the origin of the shop's name. Espet. The Finnish knives on display far outnumbered the noble Viking swords, long knives, short knives, curved knives, and straight knives. Some were wrapped in oilcloth and placed diagonally in wooden barrels, while others were sheathed in leather sheaths and scattered across the counter. They were inconspicuous. Their only distinction, besides their sleek, plain blades, was their unique, carved birch bark handles. From a wooden barrel in the corner, Lorraine pulled out a pair of broad, straight-bladed long knives, bundled in a single piece of oilcloth. They were nearly identical, with a massive blade about a palm's width wide, a hair-thin, gleaming blade, a straight back, and a tapering tip. The blades were nearly 120 centimeters long, and with their single-handed, unbranched birch bark handles, the total length was nearly 140 centimeters. Each knife weighed approximately 4 to 5 kilograms, a bit heavy, but Lorraine, after a few attempts at swinging them, found the perfect center of gravity made them easy to wield, with almost no noticeable weight. Lorraine immediately fell in love with the set and examined them carefully. He noticed the intricate, anti-slip pattern inlaid with copper wire on the handles. In the center of the pattern was the cursive inscription Martini, presumably the origin of the martini in the shop's name. Hannah approached, clutching 2 thin short knives. Seeing Lorraine playing with the knives, she was a little surprised. "Don't you use a rapier? Why are you looking at a knife? After my fight with Leif, I felt I might need a better weapon, longer, heavier, more." Hannah looked at Lorraine with disapproval. "A good weapon is one that's suitable for you. I didn't think you'd make that mistake. There might be a misunderstanding here." Lorraine rubbed his nose sheepishly. "The Drake family's ancestral deck fighting style is actually double-bladed. I've been practicing with 2 knives since I was 6, under the guidance of my father and brother. If I remember correctly, that's about 10 years. Hannah's eyes widened. "The rapier isn't your primary weapon. The rapier is the Navy standard. Drake uses it because the Navy requires it." Everyone had a clear goal, and the equipment selection quickly yielded results. Lorraine bought a long sword set, along with 2 thick fish skin scabbards and a leather cord for hanging the knives, for £16. Henna chose a set of 8 red velvet throwing knives and 2 suitable finished short knives for £7. Pierce bought a cable-breaking axe for Cran and also had his eye on a 50-centimeter-long imitation Viking short sword. He mumbled, his eyes pleading. Lorraine frowned at him. "Pierce, do you want to learn swordplay?" Little Pierce bit his lip and nodded vigorously. "Why?" "Because I don't want to be a burden," he said firmly. "When the Gemini pirates were seizing the ship, I stood behind Mr. Scott. But not only was I unable to help, I distracted him and got him hurt. I don't want this. If that's the reason, this sword isn't suitable for you." Not suitable. The dagger was a toy for Viking children learning swordsmanship, and it was also a weapon for women to defend themselves. But it has nothing to do with warriors and doesn't even deserve its own name. Lorraine rubbed his head, untied the command sword from his waist, and pressed it into his hand. "If you want to learn swordsmanship, you can use it later." Pierce stared blankly at the sword in his hand. "Sir, it is. It's the sword my father used when he captured his first enemy ship. It has sailed the world and slain pirates. It is a sword of the brave. Promise me you won't let it gather dust." "Yes. I swear on the honor of the Atis family that I will not let you down." A tortuous process, a perfect outcome. Equipped with new weapons, the group returned to the ship and made final preparations before leaving the port. 2 days later, the damaged sides of the ship were repaired, and the hold was filled with exquisite Nordic glass. The revitalized Atis Beauty rode the waves and left the dock. Escorted by the Gemini Star, it sailed out of the Bakenfjord, where it had been stationed for over 10 days, and began a new journey westward. This time, its destination was the distant Iberian Peninsula, the vast Bay of Biscay, Spain, and the declining, no longer prosperous port of Bilbao. There were peaceful harbors and passionate flamenco dances. It would be the starting point and destination of the Lorraine Triangle trade plan. It was the most crucial link. Once the Spanish trade route was opened, he could import New World goods into Britain, send Scottish spirits to Scandinavia, and then return Nordic furs and exquisite craftsmanship to the European continent, thus establishing a superior distribution system within the offshore trade circle. That would bring him wealth, and how quickly it would accumulate. Watch the wind, watch the sky. No longer need to care about people's faces. Spain, the country that launched the age of exploration, what awaits me? Lorraine placed one foot on the foredeck railing, arms folded, when he heard Pierce's childish cry behind him. "Wind southeast, force 5, moderate wind." Lorraine grinned, released his grip, and pointed straight ahead. "Quarter sail, hoist bow sail. Head southwest, destination Bermeo. Atis Bell, depart." PSA Spit is an inscription on the blade of a Viking sword unearthed today, representing the highest level of craftsmanship. Its meaning is widely debated, some claiming it refers to the swordsmith, others to an ancient legion or city, and still others to a title of honor, like Battered. PS Martiini is a transliteration of the English name for the Finnish knife, originating in 1928 when Finnish blacksmith Zheng Anyue established the first knife factory in the Rovaniemi area. Before that, Finnish knives had always been the product of small workshops, with a good reputation but no iconic brand or name. As for why I designed such a shop, let's just assume that the gentleman basking in the sun in the article is Comrade Jane's great and ambitious ancestor. PS3. The Vikings treated their swords as they treated their people. Every true Viking sword is a member of the family, with its own unique name. A more familiar one is Widowmaker. Chapter 27. You're the Gypsy. Dressed in neat tuxedos, Lorraine and Henna sat in a tacky, glittering drawing room. Opposite them was the room's owner, Mr. Frey, a glassware merchant from Black Harbor. Mr. Frey, thank you sincerely for taking the time out of your busy schedule to accept our request for a meeting. Ahem, we've bought a shipload of exquisite glassware from the Kingdom of Norway. While not the work of a master, the shapes and patterns are clear and the quality is excellent. Could you spare a moment of your time to take a quick look? Didn't you already bring it? If I don't take it out, it will probably delay me even longer. Frey pulled out a silk scarf and slowly wiped the emeralds from his fingers. Time is money, young sir. I agree. Lorraine smiled brightly and waved his hand, asking Henna to bring out a square wooden box and open it in Frey's direction. Frey glanced at the back of Henna's coffee-colored hand with distaste. More, she's a Coptic, sir, tisk, no different. Unaware that he had just crossed a line between life and death, Frey put away his silk scarf, pulled a pair of white gloves from his pocket, and carefully lifted the glass bowl from the box. It was a large bowl with curved diagonal lines, crystal clear and blooming like a flower. Carved on all four sides were four religious images: the Virgin Mary, Christ embracing Christ, the Son saving his mother, and the Holy Trinity. The carvings were stained with vibrant colors, a testament to the exquisite craftsmanship. Frey studied it for a long time, then suddenly asked, "Young man, you are under 20, right?" 16, sir, 16. When I was 16, I was still soliciting business at my relative's shop. My father didn't want me to touch his own business. Lorraine knew what Frey was asking. He had heard similar questions many times in the past few days. He shook his head. "Sir, I am English. For the English, it is normal to go on board a ship at the age of 13 or 14, but their positions are limited to trainees. Perhaps the best among them can become seamen, but they can never be captains." Frey put down the basin and squinted his eyes. "Young sir, I am very curious, how can your family be so sure of your safety at sea?" "Maybe, this is the advantage of not having a family." "Nothing." Frey pondered and swept the edge of the glass basin, one circle, two circles, and finally stopped. "The quality is good. If all you have are of this quality, I am willing to offer 2.5 pounds for each one." "I will take as many as you have." Lorraine closed the box gently, stood up and left. "Sorry to bother you, Mr. Frey." Frey sat up leisurely and crossed his legs. "Young people should be more realistic. You don't have a permanent residence agreement. In Bermeo, it's not easy to find a buyer who offers a higher price than me. Thank you for your advice. Goodbye." Spain, Bermeo Blackport. On the 17th day of the Atis Beauty anchoring, Lorraine still failed to sell his glass. Each Blackport has its own unique characteristics. Cherbourg is characterized by chaos, Elgin by order. Stavanger is as reckless and xenophobic as the Vikings, while Bermeo resembles the twilight years of the Spanish kingdom, outwardly open but inherently conservative. The business model of this black port was eye-opening to Lorraine. First, unlike other black ports, it didn't impose entry barriers on merchants. Anyone could come and do business. And everyone enjoyed institutional protection. There was no need to worry about forced buying or selling, nor the dreadful situation Lorraine had experienced in Cherbourg, where someone had to help them count the money after being sold. However, Bermeo, known as the most equitable commercial environment among the black ports, failed to achieve true fairness. Based on the tax rate set by the administrative committee, the local merchant group established strict trade barriers, implementing distinct valuation systems for resident merchants and itinerant merchants. Resident merchants could buy low and sell high in Bermeo, enjoying lower port taxes. Itinerant merchants, like Lorraine, had to accept fair prices, sell low, and bear higher taxes. Upon arriving in port, Lorraine thought this was a short-sighted attempt by the local merchant guild to exploit the locals. But after 3 consecutive rejections for resident merchant status, his view changed. This bizarre secondary market was likely not the spontaneous behavior of merchants, but a premeditated government action. Its purpose was to force a trade surplus through subtle administrative intervention, finding a dumping ground for Spanish goods while slowing the outflow of the country's gold and silver reserves. This kind of evasiveness was highly likely in Spain. The once mighty Spanish kingdom was already a thing of the past. Its royal family was extravagant and its politics conservative. As a pioneer of the age of exploration, it failed to cultivate a solid and reliable middle class during this unprecedented era of discovery. As a result, its market-generating capacity was weak, and after the boom years of colonial development, the economy began to decline sharply. On the one hand, the people were in dire straits, and domestic purchasing power was weak. On the other hand, the increasingly mature colonies continuously shipped products back to Spain, piling them up in warehouses. The intertwined conflicts between the two sides led to a strange oversupply of overseas products, which were in short supply throughout Europe, in the Spanish market. This was why black ports like Bermeo emerged. In the shrewd calculations of the Spanish, they never considered using these offshore black ports to accept products from other countries. They simply wanted to use the shipping capacity of black market merchants to sell the colonial goods piling up at home, the more the better. Having figured this out, Lorraine completely abandoned the idea of changing ports. The black ports throughout the Gulf of Cape Passau were likely to be like this. And not just the black ports, perhaps even Spain's official ports were operating in this way. Otherwise, how could a major port like Bilbao fall into disrepair so quickly, so unexpectedly? Isn't this asking for trouble? Leaving Mr. Frey's exchange with Henna, Lorraine dropped his disguise and rubbed his brow wearily. Henna, which one is this? 10. The highest bid is £2.12, the lowest is £1.16. These Spanish merchants are so good at calculating. Are they too good at business, or are they just bad at it? The two walked languidly until they reached a small square and sat down on a bench. Lorraine was in a dilemma. On the one hand, foreign goods were the most important link in the triangular trade ring Lorraine had designed. They ensured the diversity of the guild's merchandise and helped Lorraine quickly build connections. He absolutely could not give up the unique market environment in Spain, where foreign goods were urgently needed. On the other hand, accepting unequal treaties against itinerant merchants would significantly slow his wealth accumulation, even ruining his promising start in Scotland and Norway, and ultimately confining him to the small world of black marketeers for the rest of his life. The best way to resolve this dilemma was to obtain resident merchant status in Bermeo. He had already inquired about the Bermeo Black Port Management Committee, which consisted of 7 gentlemen, and his application for resident merchant status required the approval of 4 of them. Lorraine was completely unfamiliar with the area, and achieving this condition quickly was incredibly difficult. Fortunately, he had another option, Viscount Alfonso. A member of the 7-member board of directors, the Viscount held a high reputation and held a strong influence over the other members. Only with his help could Lorraine possibly break through the situation in Bermeo. But we're not related, and the Viscount is often away from the port. How can I contact him? Lorraine pondered intently, his mind focused, and before he knew it, he blurted out his true feelings. Henna raised an eyebrow. We can find out his home address. I'll disguise myself and kidnap his child. Then you can rescue him right in front of him and chase me off. That way, we'll establish a friendship. Lorraine was amused and confused. Such a contrived scenario. Do you think the Viscount is stupid? We can make it more realistic, Henna said, her voice murderous. For example, when I rescue you, I'll poke a few holes in you to make you bleed. Out of guilt, the Viscount won't be easily suspicious. You aren't serious. Henna was serious. She'd been fed up these past few days, and her mind was obsessed with poking transparent holes in people. No pretense was possible. Lorraine saw through it and was stunned. He swallowed hard, his eyes wandering until he saw a dozen colorful domed caravans roll out from the end of the square, occupying a corner of it. Good news. Lorraine was ecstatic and hurriedly changed the subject. Look, Henna, there are gypsies here. Deathly silence. Henna looked at him coldly, and said word by word in a clear voice, You are the gypsy. Your whole family is gypsies. P.S. Gypsies are called differently in different regions. The British call them gypsies, the French call them Bohemians, the Spanish call them flamencos, the Russians call them gypsies, the Albanians call them Evergites, the Greeks call them Akinganas, the Iranians call them Rory, the Sri Lankans call them Aquinticus, and the gypsies call themselves Roma. In the language of the gypsies, the original meaning of Roma is people. The word gypsy originated from a British misunderstanding of the origins of the Roma people. At the time, the British mistakenly believed that the Roma people came from Egypt, so they called them Egyptians. Gypsy is a phonetic variation of Egypt. The above is quoted from Baidu Encyclopedia. Considering the discrimination and bad reputation that gypsies have long endured in Europe, calling an Egyptian gypsy to their face can basically be seen as a subtle insult to the Egyptians. This is roughly the case. PS2. Copts equals ancient Egyptians, an indigenous ethnic group in Egypt. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 28 Henna and Black Cat. What a mistake. Having made a colossal slip of the tongue, Lorraine, brows downcast, followed Henna back to the boat like a young wife, completely devoid of any captain's demeanor. Little Pierce, bewildered, hurriedly dropped his deck-washing duties to gossip. Captain, what are you doing? Have you done your 500 fencing strokes today? Yes. I did. Have you finished your 100 knot tyings? Yes. What about your 2-kilometer swim? I've done it. The chart, the homework is on your desk. I finished it last night. Lorraine tilted her head and glanced at the mop lying on the deck. So, before dark, all you have left to do is scrub the deck and make dinner. Yes, sir. Little Pierce puffed with ambition. Lorraine patted his shoulder encouragingly. Excellent. Tomorrow's training will be increased by 20%. Remember to notify Supervisor Kren. Yes, yes, a small boat is like a small bag. Lorraine, soothed by little Pierce, finally decided to face the bleakness of life head-on. That evening, he met Henna and solemnly agreed to her proposal. They agreed that if there was no progress after 3 days, they would initiate the kidnapping plan for Viscount Alfonso's heir. The script consisted of only 16 words: Henna kidnaps, Lorraine rescues, 3 stabs and 6 wounds in exchange for friendship. Early the next morning, revitalized, Lorraine and Henna re-entered the port, busy with their futile but well-intentioned sales pitch. And then, dusk. It was the same square, the same tired, lost figures. Jeeps. Roma people danced passionate flamenco in front of a caravan. Guitars, castanets, songs, and the resounding harley of that sort into the sky seemed to have a magical power, breathing life into the soul. Lorraine and Henna were drawn in, watching silently for a long time from the caravan. Only when the sun set did Lorraine flick a finger and toss a gold pound into the open guitar case, and smiles returned to their faces. Lorraine bent his elbow toward Henna. "Beautiful lady, may I invite you to dinner on my boat?" Henna puffed her cheeks, tucked her arm around Lorraine's, and whispered, "Beef tonight, Spanish beef stew." The lights were beginning to come on. Lorraine, holding Henna's arm, walked down the market alley leading to the docks. On the way, they spotted a small black cat with white ears. It seemed to have been following him for a while. Probably, since the square. He waved at the skinny kitten in confusion. The little creature actually came closer, nuzzling Lorraine's hand affectionately with its furry head. Lorraine was amused by its naivete. "Really? Aren't you afraid I'll kidnap you?" "Meow, what do you want?" "Meow, hungry." Lorraine sniffed himself. He wasn't a fisherman, but having lived on a boat for years, he mostly ate fish. He wouldn't believe the lie that he didn't smell fishy at all. Yet, such a faint, almost inaudible scent could actually attract a adorable kitten, or a black cat that only represents good luck. Was his luck about to change? Superstitious Mr. Drake absent-mindedly scratched the black cat's soft white ears. Suddenly, he stood up and bought a large piece of salmon from the fish shop next door. He tore it off bit by bit, fearing the cute little one would choke. The little one ate with great gusto, soon devouring the entire morsel. Meow, it licked Lorraine's empty palm, caressing it, becoming increasingly affectionate with Lorraine. Lorraine poked its head, feeling both amused and embarrassed. "Are you still not full?" "Meow, but I just saw there were only a few pieces of smoked fish left at the fish shop." "You can't eat smoked fish. The big salt grains will make the little one sick." "Meow, first, sir, could you please let go of the white ears?" A timid voice suddenly emerged from the corner of the alley. Lorraine saw a dirty young girl, clutching her sleeve, helpless. She looked about 13 or 14, petite, with black hair and dark eyes. Her nearly oval face held large, long, bright eyes, and beneath a high nose bridge sat a slightly wide mouth. This was the typical Roma look, a touch Indian yet a touch Caucasian. Most Roma are generally warm and cheerful, but the sudden appearance of this timid little girl, with her awkward expression and pale face, made Lorraine unsure of her judgment. However, it didn't seem to matter. Lorraine rubbed the kitten's head and asked the girl, "Is it your cat?" "Yes, please, can you let it go? I didn't catch it, it's just hungry." Lorraine smiled, standing up. Seeing no more food, the kitten meowed pitifully, turned its head, and darted back into the girl's arms like an arrow. A smile spread across the girl's face. "Thank you, sir," she bowed to Lorraine, then backed away into the shadows. Soon, she was gone at the end of the alley, out of sight. Lorraine watched the girl disappear in the direction she had disappeared, frowning slightly. "Henna, don't you think there's something strange about both of them, huh?" Henna was startled. "What's strange? You're also distracted." Lorraine let out a laugh. "Are you that fond of that cat?" Henna bit her lip. "It's not all about the cat, actually. I just remembered something from the past, something about my brother." Henna's voice was a little deep, floating softly on the night breeze. If you didn't listen carefully, you wouldn't be able to hear it clearly. But her expression was smiling. "You know, after our father died, my brother and I fled to Cherbourg. He was injured at that time. In order to treat his injuries, I worked in old Hansa's tavern for a long time. I helped old Hansa clean up the tavern during the day, killed people at noon, and worked as a waiter at night. Apart from changing my brother's medicine, I had almost no time to accompany him. It was during that time that he picked up a black cat, all black, very similar to white ears. He liked it very much and named it Romley. He held it every day, and like you just now, he tore off the meat I bought bit by bit to feed it, as if he was afraid it would choke. Henna smiled more gently, and as she spoke, she and Lorraine walked towards the pier. Then I fell ill. I worked like crazy for months. When I had to kill someone, I often couldn't sleep for days. I'd catch a fever and almost die before my brother. What saved me was a bowl of broth. That day, he was covered in cat blood, smiling, but tears dripped into the broth. I can't forget that scene, and even until he died, I still remember the taste of that broth. It was so sour that it was hard to swallow. At this point, Lorraine knew Henna had finished her story. Her voice remained calm, so calm that it inspired pity. Lorraine turned and hugged her. Henna didn't struggle, just leaning into Lorraine's arms, listening to the sea breeze and gazing at the moon. Lorraine asked, "Do you want to cry?" "No." Henna replied crisply. "You know, you two are actually very similar, stubborn, smart, and brave. Even the same age, but I'm not him, I know. It's just that sometimes I can't help but think, if you were him, how wonderful it would be." P.S. In England, black cats are a symbol of good luck. The English believe that owning a black cat is good luck, and finding white hair on a black cat will bring good luck. However, never pluck it, otherwise the good luck will turn into bad luck. Chapter 29, The Roma Internal Conflict. It seemed the black cat's luck wasn't enough to pry open Bermeo's rigid trade barriers. On another fruitless evening, Lorraine and Henna walked out of the stock exchange side by side, their eyes no longer shrouded in the gloom of the previous few days. Tomorrow, they would submit their final application to the board of directors for a business license. If rejected, they would initiate their backup plan and force a friendship with Mr. Alfonso. In short, they would never again face the wrath of those damned Spanish stock exchanges. A sudden sense of relief washed over them, and their mood brightened. Lorraine smiled and asked Henna, "What would you like to eat tonight?" "I want to see flamenco." Roma. The small Roma square was a bit far for them today, but they weren't in a hurry, so they walked arm in arm through Bermeo's bustling streets. Spanish architecture is truly distinctive, high in the distance, low near, winding streets and narrow alleys. Roofs were covered in red terracotta tiles, and long rows of hand-plastered walls lined the streets. They loved curved forms. Small arches resembling waves, reef-like curved cornices, and long curved walls inspired by the bay are everywhere in the streets and alleys, highlighting the country's affinity for the sea. Balconies adorned with ironwork and ceramic ornaments and filled with greenery, as well as the predominantly light and warm colors of painted walls and tiles, reveal the Spaniards' cheerful and sunny nature. They are a very likable people. Perhaps they would be even more endearing if they were less unconventional in their business practices. The two returned to the small square, and night had already fallen. Roma caravans sat quietly in a semicircle in one corner, devoid of any sense of life. Lorraine shrugged regretfully. "Probably no flamenco today." Henna didn't respond immediately. She frowned, staring questioningly at a dark alley not far away, motionless. Lorraine was puzzled. "Henna, I think I hear white ears." White ears. Lorraine suddenly remembered the nagging little black cat from last night. Faintly, he could hear a cat meowing in the alley. But the sound was so far away, so distant that he couldn't tell if it was a cat or a baby crying. As for which cat was meowing, "Henna, Bermeo may not be a big place, but a cat I stumbled across, it's it." Henna closed her eyes, frowning deeply. "I can hear it crying for help." Before she could even say the word help, Henna dove into the alley. Lorraine stared blankly at his tuxedo and the umbrella in his hand, then gave a wry smile. "Next time I go to Stavanger, I must ask Mr. Martini to order an umbrella sword. The winding alleys never end." Lorraine chased Henna's footsteps through the deep, narrow alleys of Bermeo. His tall hat had long since vanished, his pure white curls tossed to the ground. To run more swiftly, he even unbuttoned his vest, letting his formal attire rustle like Henna's frock. But even then, he could only barely keep pace with Henna. Henna was in the sky. The narrow alley was littered with scattered debris. Unable to move smoothly, she leaped, stepping onto the scattered balconies on either side of the street, weaving in like a cat. Lorraine couldn't match her agility, so he resorted to the most ruthless method, charged straight ahead. One leaping on top, the other bumping on the ground, the 2 or 3 miles passed in a flash. Finally, following the cat's meow, they located a remote, dark alleyway in the narrow lane. It was a dead-end alley, less than 2 meters wide, flanked by 4 or 5-story buildings. The alley was piled high with planks and boxes, carefully wrapped in oilcloth by the owner, who then covered the cloth with old netting and weighted it down with heavy objects. This towering pile, gloomy in the night, resembled a man-made mountain, firmly blocking the alley's exit. The crowd inside was surprisingly bustling. The Roma girl I'd met yesterday leaned against the debris blocking the alley, trembling and panicking. In her hands, she held a deep purple crystal ball the size of an orange. On her shoulder, perched the meowing white-eared creature that had led Lorraine and Hannah there. Her entire body was frozen, her black eyes gleaming faintly purple in the crystal ball's reflection. In her clear irises, she reflected a sturdy man, wielding a dagger, protecting her, covered in blood and wounds. They were in danger, and their opponents were blocking the other side of the alley. There were 5 of them, each as strong as the man protecting her, wielding daggers, wearing sackcloth and square hats. They were all Roma. Lorraine's attention was momentarily distracted, and her first thought was, a Roma internal conflict? Before he could comprehend, the towering hyena had leaped from the man-made cliff face, landing with a whoosh between the girl and the man protecting her. Without a second thought, she drew her knife and plunged it directly into the man's side. Blood sprayed across the wall. The man collapsed, his death unclear. Hyena stood up, knife in hand, facing the girl. "Rest," she said, "you're safe." The girl's tense body relaxed, as if hearing a divine call. She slumped limply against the pile of debris, sweat pouring down her face, leaving large stains on her clothes. Lorraine had no idea what was happening. 2 Roma gangs were fighting, and Hina had intervened, stabbing the girl's protector to death. But the girl wasn't frightened or horrified, but rather relaxed, a look of relief. In this situation, which side was Hina going to side with? He didn't dwell on it for long. In a split second, the 5 men howled as they charged at Henna. Henna raised her foot and hooked the body from the ground, thus making the enemy clear to Lorraine. Helping the women, hitting the men, tisk-tisk, Lorraine flung his umbrella. The folded umbrella, like a javelin or an arrow, missed any of the enemies. It grazed everyone's face, piercing through the crowd between heads, and crashed straight into the body Henna had hooked. Inertia still blocked the way forward, and the massive umbrella suddenly opened. The black oilskin filled the narrow alley, creating a sharp barrier in the center, dividing inside and outside, men and women. The gentleman in the tuxedo slowly buttoned his vest, raised his arm, and bowed to the crowd. "Respected gentlemen, your opponent is here." The battle was over quickly. Although Lorraine was outnumbered 5, and although the opponents had swords in their hands, the alley was too narrow for 2 people to move out at the same time. The so-called 5-on-1 was nothing more than 5 consecutive 1-on-1 narrow encounters, and the opponents had nowhere to run. Avoid the sword, hold the head, hit the wall, avoid the sword, hold the head, hit the wall. Repeated 5 rounds, the battle was over. Lorraine's clothes were not even wrinkled. And a pile of Roma people were lying on the ground. He shook the lapels of his tuxedo leisurely, smoothed the turned-up collar, and with a click, put away the black umbrella. A top hat, a wig. "I think I deserve a reasonable explanation," asking for votes, sincerely, loudly. Chapter 30, Witch Confirmation. The girl's name was Noah Sarah. She was a fortune-teller, thaumaturgist, violinist, dancer, and also a witch of the Ramsara tribe. Hearing this glittering and extraordinary resume, and then looking at this timid, tearful little girl, Lorraine felt a headache. They seemed to have been involved in something truly significant. Thanks to the Dominican friars, Messrs. Kramer and Sprenger, the term witch became a household name in the Catholic world. In the mid-15th century, the shadow of the Black Death still lingered in every corner of Europe. A century of recuperation had failed to restore the devastated land, and the lack of medical care was a constant reminder that when the next Black Death struck, they would still be powerless. At that time, a group of women roamed the continent in the guise of spirits and spirits. Their limited medical skills and willingness to treat the poor quickly earned them the admiration and respect of society. They were revered as witches. This infuriated the church at the time, as most witches were pagans, or they concealed their beliefs and disguised themselves as pagans for livelihoods and a sense of mystery. To maintain its dominance in the secular world, the church launched a campaign of smear campaigns against them. This campaign reached its peak in 1484. Kramer and Sprenger, through despicable means such as false accusations, intimidation, rumors, and torture, obtained a wealth of iron evidence, After compiling and editing this evidence, they systematically identified, deciphered, and prosecuted witchcraft, creating a remarkable book called The Hammer of Witches. This book officially separated the term witch from the traditional category of paganism, making it synonymous with evil, terror, curse, and plague. Panic seized the public, and at the church's instigation, a massive witch trial movement swept across the Catholic world, lasting for 3 centuries. According to incomplete estimates, at least 100,000 innocent women perished in this deceptive hoax. Even to this day, Lorraine still occasionally hears stories of burnings at the stake, though these are mostly confined to the inland villages, where people are often ignorant and information-free. It's fair to say that the more persecution of witches by the faithful is as profound as their fear of them. And here before him was a genuine witch. Just moments earlier, she had used the purple crystal ball in her pocket to charm a killer into becoming her patron, until Henna swooped down from the sky and broke the mysterious spell with a single strike. Lorraine was intrigued by the scientific principles underlying this, but with night approaching, this alley filled with Roma people seemed an unlikely place for such a journey. He pondered for a moment. Miss Noah Sarah? Yes, Noah's voice was thin. She stood across from Lorraine, twisting her sleeves, bewildered, like a shy little girl, not a broomstick riding Quidditch chasing Sky Knight. Lorraine narrowed her eyes and asked solemnly, Miss Sarah, can you ride a broom, huh? Unfortunately, Noah couldn't. She'd never even ridden a horse in her life, only a caravan. Lorraine's interest in her waned instantly. Even the delivery girl, Kiki, could ride a broom, so a witch who couldn't must be a fake. As for how she could command her opponents to succumb to her despair with just a crystal ball, Lorraine suspected it might have something to do with some kind of deep-seated psychological suggestion technique. While mysterious, it wasn't worth making a fuss about. To Lorraine, the witch who couldn't ride a broom was just a stranger. Now that Henna's sense of justice had been satisfied, it was natural for them to part ways. Leaving the alley, Lorraine patted Noah's chest in farewell, then took Henna's arm and continued on their journey back to the ship to plan tomorrow's kidnapping. But Lorraine stopped walking. Meow. As Lorraine walked, she turned around again. Sir, Noah and White Ears followed Lorraine 5 meters away, their heads hanging down and clutching their sleeves, neither chasing nor moving away. If Lorraine walked faster, she would walk faster. If Lorraine walked slower, she would walk slower. If Lorraine stopped, White Ears would bark. If Lorraine turned around, Noah would start crying. The witch cried very skillfully, not throwing a tantrum, but sobbing silently. Big tears rolled in her long, bright eyes, and they would never fall, making her eyes lose their miserable, tearful and pitiful state for a moment. Henna tilted her head and frowned. Lorraine, is that so? She's a witch, and we have Pierce and Cren on board, but we're short of people. She's a witch, and she's never been to sea, and she can't sail. There are mice on board. She's a witch, and White Ears is just a lazy cat who eats and waits to die, only knows how to be cute. I don't think he can handle the responsibility of catching mice. I can teach him. Lorraine frowned. He suddenly remembered that Henna could catch mice just like a real cat, as this was part of her daily training in cat fighting. Lorraine was in a dilemma. Henna, tell me the truth, are you so insistent because of the people or the cats? Henna's emerald eyes flashed. My brother has a black cat, you should have one too. I told you I'm not your brother, I know, so you should have one too, crazy. Lorraine paused irritably at the umbrella handle and took a deep breath. Henna, if you want a black cat, I can accompany you to the market after we've gotten through to Viscount Alfonso. For now, let's prioritize the Viscount, okay? Noya, half hidden in the shadows, raised her hand timidly. Sir, are you talking about Viscount Alfonso of Bermeo? Viscount Cecilic Alfonso, the black cat's good fortune had arrived silently. The Roma Sera are a unique Roma tribe. Over 4 generations, they have wandered westward from Minsk, Poland, embracing Eastern Orthodoxy, Catholicism, and Protestantism before returning to Catholicism in Spain. This is the typical Roma faith, adapting to any situation like a floating duckweed. They are devout believers who can mitigate the hostility around them. But they are undoubtedly believers in God. As a group of God worshippers skilled in divination, they were highly sought after among the noble women of Spain. They often traveled to certain cities, often at the behest of certain ladies, to perform divinations for them, earning temporary accommodations and lucrative commissions. This trip to Bermeo was no different. Lady Alfonso had lost her fertility due to illness, and Viscount Alfonso, childless for a long time, had unexpectedly fallen in love with a lady's beautiful country cousin. Desperate for a child and anxious about her marriage, the lady turned to divination. A friend had introduced her to the Ramzala tribe and invited them to Bermeo, hoping to find a solution to their predicament through tarot readings. However, the Ramzala tribe suffered an unforeseen incident on their way there. Their sorceress, Noya's mother, had died. They were attacked outside the city by a group of bankrupt peasants, and Noya's mother was killed by a stray arrow. Before her death, she entrusted Noya with a magically powerful crystal ball of fate, making her the new sorceress of the tribe. The ensuing drama was typical of royal succession. Noya's three cousins refused to acknowledge this shy, timid, and unromanu witch as their tribal leader. The very night they arrived in Bermeo, they incited rebellion and began a violent plot to seize the crystal ball of fate. Luckily, Noya escaped and wandered the streets of Bermeo, starving for days, barely clothed. Nearing death, she was rescued by Lorraine and Hannah. That's the whole story. After listening to Noya's story on the dock, Lorraine and Hannah huddled together, their heads pressed together, whispering, "Hannah, the kidnapping plan has failed. Viscount Alfonso has no heir. As for his wife and country cousin, no matter which one we kidnap, the other will encourage us to kill her. And whether we kill her or not, we will offend the Viscount. Yeah, in other words, now only through the divination of the Ramzara tribe can we quickly establish friendship with the Viscount." Yeah. After reaching a consensus, Lorraine stood up and straightened the wrinkles on his tuxedo. "Miss Noisera, yes, out of courtesy, I have to ask for your opinion first." Lorraine nodded slightly. "Do you want to board the ship and start a new wandering with us strangers? I was abandoned by the tribe. If I leave the harbor, I may be caught and burned to death. If I stay in the harbor, I will definitely be killed by my cousin's people. You are a powerful person, so." Noah bit his lip. "Yes, I hope to get your protection and become your loyal crew member. In that case, I have 3 questions I need to understand clearly. You say, first, how many people are there in the Ramzara tribe besides you?" "There are 37 men, 18 women, and 6 children left." Lorraine closed his eyes and thought for a while. "Is there any way to let them know that you are on my ship?" "You don't have to do anything. We will buy intelligence from thieves, beggars and vagrants. No movement in the port can be hidden from my cousin's eyes." The third question, although the Viscountess believes in witchcraft, what about the Viscount? What is his attitude towards witchcraft? Noah's little face was tangled. He is a devout Christian and is very disgusted with us, so the divination was not carried out immediately. "Madam needs time to persuade Mr. Viscount." "Really?" Lorraine smiled and stretched out his hand to Noya. "Miss Fortune Teller Noisera, congratulations, you are accepted. P.S. The Hammer of Witches is a notorious book of religious persecution that has influenced the Catholic world for 3 centuries. It is the main guidebook for the witch trial incident, and its huge influence lasted until the first half of the 18th century. The Black Death refers specifically to the Great Plague of medieval Europe from 1347 to 1353, which killed over 25 million people, a third of Europe's population at the time. This epidemic profoundly impacted Europe and catalyzed a series of significant historical events, including the Reformation and the Renaissance. Chapter 31 The Crystal Ball of Destiny. Under the cover of night, the Attis Beauty, sails furled, quietly departed the harbor. Like a coastal fishing boat, it anchored in the vast waters 5 miles from Bermeo, bobbing and sliding against the waves. Suddenly, 2 new members joined the ship, a Roma witch, all was at Hannah's side, and a well-behaved, white-eared black cat, meowing adorably on Lorraine's lap. To Pierce, this was unusual. Bringing a dangerous figure like a witch aboard, or leaving the harbor for no apparent reason, nothing seemed right. He was absent-mindedly mixing a salad in the kitchen when he saw the burly Karen sneak into the cabin with the stealthy demeanor of a polar bear stealing bird eggs. "Mr. Scott, what are you doing?" Karen straightened his back and cleared his throat. "Little Pierce, what are we having for dinner tonight?" "The main course is Grandma Rowling's tomato, lettuce and butter salad and mustard tuna. The side dishes are dark beer and orange juice, and the appetizer is deviled eggs." Devil." Karen's white face turned pale. Devil. "The devil is here so soon?" Pierce rolled his eyes, picked up a plate of white with yellow core from the dining table, and stuffed the eye-catching snacks into Karen's hand, repeating with emphasis, "Deviled eggs, Halloween deviled eggs, devil eggs." Karen stared at the eggs in his hand for a long time. His square face turned from white to red, from red to red, and from red to slightly purple, and smoke came out of his ears. He grunted for a long time and whispered, "Little Pierce, you have a good relationship with the captain. Tell me, how could the captain let a witch on board? Selecting crew members is the captain's privilege. Even God can't interfere, but that's a witch. She has a black cat, wears a cloak, is extremely ugly, and mutters to herself. There's a big pot on the house, and lizards, bats, spiders, and poisonous snakes are boiled in it. That's the kind of witch." Pierce looked at Karen helplessly. Mr. Scott, White Ears seems to prefer captains who can fish. The one wearing a cloak on the boat is Ms. Yesla. It is my job to cook in the big pot, and I have never cooked any lizards, bats, spiders, or poisonous snakes. As for mumbling, there wasn't any on the boat before, but now there is a German boatman. And ugliness. Miss Sarah was a little dirty when she first came on board, but after washing her face, tell me honestly, is she ugly? Kren was so embarrassed that he hesitated, but she is a witch. Pierce wiped his hands and took off his apron. Mr. Scott, if you really care so much, why don't you ask the captain directly? I asked. What did the captain say? Kren took a deep breath. He said witch is a respectful title and witch is a slander. And the one on the boat is a witch, not a witch. Do you understand this? If you understand, would I come to you? Pierce sighed with understanding. Actually, I asked about this secretly as well. What did the captain tell you? He said, to eat light these 2 days, or there might be blood on board. Kren's eyes slowly widened. He muttered to himself, the captain has kidnapped a witch. The devil is coming. Lorraine, who had kidnapped the witch, was fishing. He sat cross-legged on the bow deck, 4 fishing rods spread out before him like a flower. White Ear, a boneless creature, lay on his lap. His 2 knives lay flat beside him. Behind him, the Scott crossbow. Its oilcloth peeled off, pointed high into the air. The fish in the Bay of Biscay were easy to catch. 4 rods were in the water, and 2 had already taken bites. The bright white boys sank to the bottom, but Lorraine showed no intention of lifting his rods. White Ear was a foodie, catching one and eating another. He had already eaten a haddock and a small sardine. If he continued to cast, the little creature would be too full to walk, which would be bad for his stomach. He waited in boredom until the 3rd rod sank when Lorraine finally heard footsteps. It was Henna. Although Henna's walk was usually silent, with Noah following behind her, she naturally made some noise. Noah washed herself. Her fair hands and clean face, the water droplets still lingering on the ends of her curly hair, shimmering in the moonlight, added a touch of charm to her, giving her a touch of Roma womanliness. Lorraine waved at Noah. Noah stepped onto the deck and stood behind Lorraine, biting her lip. Are you used to being on a boat? Even though this is our first time at sea, Roma are naturally adaptable to all means of transportation. It's a gift from our ancestors, Noah whispered. As long as I'm not seasick. Lorraine picked up white seers and shoved them back into Noah's hands. A witch and a black cat are a perfect match. The little one is always clinging to me, causing all the fish to slip off the hook. Meow, the little one complained, stepped on Noah's shoulder, and scurried off into the hold. Lorraine laughed, stood up, and fished out a massive tuna, black on the back, white on the belly, with cyan stripes. It must have weighed at least 30 pounds, thrashing furiously on the deck, making a clattering sound. Henna stabbed the tuna's gill cover with her knife, lifted it up, and dropped it into the bucket. Then she sheathed her knife and sat down next to Lorraine. Are you planning on using the harpoon? It's better to be prepared. It depends on how many of them come, Henna nodded. When do you think they'll arrive? Tonight? Or tomorrow night? Lorraine smiled as he put on the bait and reset the rod. The Roma are wanderers on land. They want to snatch people from the wanderers on the sea, so they dare not delay too long, nor dare to be too blatant. It should be tonight. Noah suddenly interrupted. Mrs. Alfonso may convince the Viscount at any time that without the crystal ball of fate, the cousins can't do divination and will be driven away, so tonight we'll know the outcome. Lorraine looked at the calm sea with a mysterious look. Noah, can you lend me your crystal ball? Huh? If it conflicts with Roma customs, no, it's just that most people would stay away from tools for divination, so, Noah stammered, quickly pulling the crystal ball from his cloth bag, holding it in both hands, and handing it to Lorraine. Lorraine took it solemnly. The crystal ball was heavy, weighing about 5 or 6 pounds, yet only about the size of an orange, barely enough to fit in one's hand. Lorraine held it aloft, close to the moon. Through the moonlight, he could see dense, hair-like patterns within the lustrous, deep purple sphere. These patterns were peculiarly distributed, forming light-blocking bands that varied in width and thickness. Light filtering through the crystal ball became unevenly intensified, and the moon within it rippled, like a reflection in water about to shatter. Lorraine understood, realizing that Noah's magic was, as he had previously suspected, a form of mind trance using light and shadow. Generations of the Ramsara tribe had, it seemed, devoted their ingenuity to mastering the natural hair within the crystal ball of destiny. If they used a different ball, their magic would undoubtedly be significantly diminished. In other words, the crystal ball of destiny was an irreplaceable component of Ramsara witchcraft. Lorraine smacked his lips and solemnly handed the ball back to Noah. Seeing Pierce waving at him in the stern cabin with a plate in hand, he said, "Let's go eat. It's better to stay up late after eating." P.S. Grandma Rowling's Western cooking class. Deviled eggs. Ingredients: 1 teaspoon, 5 ml, of white vinegar, 2 tablespoons, 15 ml, of mayonnaise, 1 teaspoon, 5 ml, of mustard, 1/4 teaspoon, 1.5 g, of black pepper, salt to taste. Taste, salty and fragrant. Difficulty of making, beginner. Method: 1. Put an appropriate amount of water in a pot and boil it. Gently put the eggs into the boiling water and cook for 10 minutes. 2. Take out the cooked eggs and soak them in cold water to cool, and remove the eggshells. 3. Cut the eggs in half lengthwise, scoop out the egg yolks, put them in a bowl, and crush the egg yolks with a spoon. 4. Add mayonnaise, white vinegar, mustard, black pepper and salt and mix well. 5. Put the mixed egg yolks into the piping tape, and squeeze flowers on the original egg yolk position in the egg white. 6. Add a diced carrot or some chopped coriander to the center of the egg yolk to make the color more beautiful. Chapter 32 Kidnapping. Late at night, the sea was still. Tonight, the Bay of Biscay was windless, the surface of the calm waters as clear as a mirror. The sea and sky, one color, contrasted against the 2 bright moons, a beauty so captivating it was almost enchanting. Lorraine remained at the bow. He closed his eyes, bent his legs, hummed an unknown tune, and leaned against the Scott crossbow. The main bolts, attached to the crossbow, had been removed and now lay neatly beside them, along with the spare bolts, which were not attached to the crossbow. The crew was also ready. The large man, Kren, with his massive hammer slung over his shoulder and his newly purchased mooring axe at his waist, paced restlessly on the main deck. Hannah, perched high on the observation deck, her emerald eyes gazing at the land, motionless, like a statue. During dinner, Lorraine announced to the crew that there would be a battle tonight against the Roma, whose numbers and strength were unknown. He then used this as an excuse to confine Pierce and Noah to the stern cabin. Pierce was somewhat reluctant to be alone in a cabin with a witch, but as an English gentleman, he could neither disobey the captain's orders nor refuse to protect a lady. So, tonight, there would be no more entanglements on deck. The group waited, calmly or uncalmly, for nearly 3 hours. Just before 10 o'clock, Hannah clambered down the sail ropes and swung over to Lorraine. Lorraine slowly opened her eyes. "Are they here?" 5 boats, not far from shore, 4 fast, 1 slow. "It seems Noah's 3 cousins aren't as united as they appear." Lorraine patted her buttocks, stood up, and gestured to Karen. Karen's steps suddenly stopped. His first reaction was to pull out the cross from his neck, flash it outside his clothes, and then begin to pray loudly. Hannah glanced at him with a frown and whispered to Lorraine, "Do you think he and Noah will get along? He's an open-minded believer, just not used to his new companions yet. He'll be fine in a couple of days." "Really?" "Yes, because he can't find a better captain than me." Lorraine tightened the leather strap holding his knife and smiled. "You don't understand white people. If he's willing to give up even his salary, nothing in this world can stop him from staying on this ship." The 2 men joked quietly as their eyes finally showed the traces of the small boats. The Beauty's bow was facing the land. First, one appeared directly ahead of the bow, then another to the east. Soon, 2 more appeared, and then the last. Kren's prayer was finished. He strode onto the bow deck, his eyes determined, like a blessed saint. He said in a deep voice, "Captain, there are only 2 boats in the harpoon gun's range." "I see." Lorraine clicked the noose, and Kren leaned over to put the bow on. Nearly 300 meters away, Lorraine turned the dial to aim at the small boat at the edge of the firing line and unhesitatingly fired. With a long hum, the massive harpoon shot out from the bow of the Beauty like lightning. With a bang, It struck the raised bow of the small boat, shattering the planking and shattering nearly a third of the boat into pieces. The boat began to sink, and screams filled the night air. The Roma aboard panicked and jumped overboard. The small boat at the bow began to turn, hoping to escape the harpoon cannon's range. Lorraine yanked the noose again. He fired a second bolt, and with a resounding bang, the fleeing boat, facing the crossbow, was ripped in two by Lorraine's blast. 2 Roma were struck, shattered into pieces, and their blood stained the ocean. Amidst the screams, Hannah quickly reported the count. 2 rounds of crossbow bolts had killed 2 people instantly, and 14 people had fallen into the water. Lorraine unleashed his ballista and removed his boots at the side of the ship. Hannah, you and Kren handle the other 2 boats here. Remember to kill as few as possible, Hannah hummed softly. Kren asked in surprise, Captain, are you going into the water? This battle isn't just about repelling the demons, my dear Kren. Lorraine raised his hand. Hannah and I have been planning this kidnapping for 3 whole days. With a long laugh, Lorraine leaped high, diving into the calm waters of the Bay of Biscay like a fish. Splash! The Roma had boarded the ship. Centuries of wandering had not only endowed the Roma with singing and dancing skills, but had also accustomed them to discrimination and persecution, allowing them to calmly ignore accidents and death. This was a different kind of bravery from the Vikings, but the outcome was the same. Lorraine's incredibly accurate ballista didn't scare them away. The 2 boats, out of range, continued to rapidly approach the anchored bell. They cast their prepared grappling hooks and climbed up the sides of the ship, each one displaying exceptional agility. Kren's cable cutter axe only managed to sever 2 grappling hooks before Roma, daggers clutched, reached the deck. He regretfully abandoned the attempt to cut the hooks, unhooking a sledgehammer to deal with the multiple attacks. Hannah, defending the starboard side, had it much easier. She had 8 red velvet throwing knives. If Lorraine hadn't forbidden her from killing, she could have pinned all the enemies aboard the boat as it approached. But now, considering that such handy throwing knives could only be replenished in Stavanger, she suddenly realized that Lorraine's real reason for forbidding her from killing was to get her opponents onto the deck, making it easier to retrieve the knives. She felt Lorraine was being thoughtful. Hannah was delighted. Glancing at Kren's battle situation and confirming that the boatman wasn't in immediate danger of injury, she calmly waited for her opponents to board. The Roma, skilled in singing and dancing, did not disappoint her. In a short moment, 8 of them climbed onto the deck and formed an arc in front of her, waving daggers and approaching cautiously. Hannah spun like a top. From beneath her cloak, resembling a blooming peony, 8 streams of light shot out in a single breath, piercing the soles of all 8 opponents' feet. The Roma screamed and fell. She paid no attention to the outcome. After throwing her throwing knives, she turned and charged into Kren's battle group. Lorraine roamed the shallow sea like a flying fish. Her 2 unsheathed knives, held horizontally at her sides, resembled the flying fish's broad pectoral fins. Her legs swung slowly and powerfully, her feet like the harpoon-like tail fin. However, flying fish prefer to leap out of the water and glide through the air, while Lorraine remained underwater, less than a meter above the surface, without even needing to surface for breath. He swept past a drowned Roma and dove sharply, passing through the struggling feet like a ghost. Soon, he approached the boat farthest from the battlefield and slowly rose to the surface. It was a standard small river ferry, the same model as the one used as a launch aboard the Beauty, 5 meters long and 1.5 meters wide, slender with a pointed bow and a wide stern. Lorraine sheathed his knife, gently embraced the boat with his broad hands, and then exerted force, rocking it. Crash! Crash! The rocking grew more intense, and people began to fall overboard. The first to fall was a relatively young Roma woman. Seeing Lorraine underwater, her eyes widened in fear, and she spat out a large stream of bubbles. A second, then a third, followed, including a man. Lorraine forced a smile, rolled over, drew his knife, and kicked the side of the boat's bottom. This rocking was more violent than any before, and 2 people immediately fell into the water. They saw a ghost underwater, holding a long knife, lightly stabbing the man's belly. Bubbles mixed with blood gushed out. Lorraine kicked him away, guiding the knife, and swam towards the second man in the water. Chapter 33. Is it suitable? Swim over slowly, yes, catch the rope loop and put it around your wrists. Both wrists, idiot. If you don't want to be eaten by sharks, you better cooperate. Put your hands up high so I can see the rope loop. If you want to stay afloat, just tread water with your legs, okay? Those who have tied the rope loops can get on board, one person on each side, two at a time, climb up one by one. Damn it, climb up one by one. Don't the Roma speak English? Do you understand? Push any more. Push any more and you'll all be soaked in water. Damn it, the battle on the Beauty was in full swing. Pierce was teaching Noah how to tie a rope knot, and then threw the rope loop shaped like handcuffs into the water, guiding the Roma who were approaching the boat to tie themselves up and get on board one by one. Tonight's battle entered its final stage. A total of 34 Roma men and 3 women rushed to attack the Atis Beauty. The harpoon kills 2, Lorraine kills 3, and Crone kills another with a hammer. All the others, wounded and unwounded, are taken captive, along with the 3 remaining boats. Crone selects the best-looking one and tows it aboard to repair the bell's booms, marking the night's first haul. It's a pleasant surprise. In the aft dining room, 3 Roma women, soaked to the skin, huddled together, trembling under Henna's gaze. They are generally young and reasonably pretty, with large eyes, straight noses, and flowing hair. But their faces are pale, and their thin dresses cling to their bodies, creating a look of both grace and disarray. These people are truly merchants? They still can't believe that an entire tribe, over 30 men, could be rendered powerless by a mere handful of sea merchants. Lorraine's underwater presence terrified them. He was as agile as a ghost underwater, fast, steady, and his eyes gleamed. He kept his eyes open underwater, a smile on his face as he killed. He gave the impression, not of a human diving at all, but of a human-sized shark tearing into its prey. Merchants. English merchants, were they so terrifying? The 3 women shuddered. The door opened. The inner hatch creaked open, and Lorraine, dressed in dry clothes, emerged, wiping her hair. Following behind her was Noah, dodging and evading. The sight of Noah instantly restored the 3 women's momentum. The leader slammed the table and was about to shout, but Lorraine suddenly said, "If you're standing up, don't sit down." The words were soft, the tone gentle, but the women, as if they had heard the roar of a beast, remained in a precarious position, refusing to move a muscle. Lorraine pulled a chair over to sit across from the women, raised his legs, and with a snap, placed them on the table. The 3 women shuddered again. They only heard Lorraine say, "Let me introduce myself. My name is Lorraine Drake, captain of the Atis Bell, protector of Miss Noah Sarah, and a privateer from England." With Lorraine's introduction, all the mysteries were solved. Privateers, a notorious and legendary term. They were pirates, soldiers, and adventurers, but not serious, submissive merchants. Taking all these characteristics into account, they were killers. The 3 women stared at each other. The Roma were foxes. Foxes feed on lambs, and they also serve as food for wild beasts. They should have given a wide berth to real wild beasts. But they were so presumptuous as to instigate their tribe to attack a wild beast, and in the water, an aquatic beast. Were all the intelligence dealers in Bermeo amateurs? Seeing the expressions of shock and anger on their faces, Lorraine whistled softly. "It seems you ladies are well informed. I can save you some time and not start with the origins of privateers. Yes, are you 3 thirsty?" "No." Lorraine sneered and snapped his fingers. Hannah pushed a small keg of stout across the long table, swishing against the surface until it landed right at his feet. Noah brought a beer, and Lorraine moistened his throat. "Well, let me put it this way, today's meeting wasn't particularly friendly. My crew wanted to go to sea, which was a brave and responsible decision. As family, you can have doubts and persuade them, but you shouldn't use force." The leading woman's face fell, and she immediately retorted, "We're not crew." Lorraine interrupted with a high voice. From the moment they boarded the ship, they became the captain's sacred and inviolable personal property. "You're trying to seize my property by force. That's not good." The 3 women suddenly became hesitant. Lorraine's words were just sophistry, but the situation didn't allow them to question it. Lorraine didn't intend to listen to their doubts. He only let them digest it for a moment and then continued, "You robbed my property, and I could have forgiven you. England teaches gentlemen to be magnanimous, just like me. But you hurt my ship in the process of robbing. Our people only cast the hook a few times. The hook will damage the railing, and the dirty boots will damage the planks. The most troublesome thing is the blood. The blood will seep into the wood along the texture of the deck, creating dirt that cannot be cleaned. This dirt contains organic matter, which will rot and destroy the structure of the wood. If it seeps into the keel, how is it possible?" the youngest woman shouted. "Why not? Ships are precious things, you don't understand. After this battle, our ship looks intact, but in fact the entire structure is broken. It is very likely that it will fall apart during the voyage, and in the middle of the vast ocean, all the people on board will be thrown into the sea with nowhere to escape. The older one swallowed. Then sir, how do you think this matter should be resolved? Compensation. Lorraine sighed. Our ship is the latest merchant ship, costing £10,000. Our crew are the best sailors, including master craftsmen from the naval port, assassins who are rarer than pandas, descendants of noble families, and the best leather workers in England. By the way, there are witches who are rarer than assassins. How much? How much? Accidental injury insurance, mental damage compensation, labor fees, loss of work time, loss of youth and continuing education guarantee. I will generously write off the small change for the ship, a total of £100,000. How much? £100,000. You are blackmailing. It was the youngest one again. Among Noah's cousins, she seemed to have the loudest voice. Lorraine glanced at her helplessly and said earnestly, honestly, do you think I, a man who holds the lives of your entire tribe in my hands and could wipe the Ramsara tribe off the face of the earth at any moment? I'm an upright, generous, honest, and compassionate English gentleman. Would resort to such a despicable tactic as blackmail. Lorraine's glance brought the three women back to reality. They finally thought of seeking help from the tribe member behind him, whose eyes were narrowed into crescents. The eldest cousin, clutching the tabletop and biting her lip, turned to Noah for help. Noah. Mistress Witch, for the sake of our kind, your mother would definitely not want the Ramsala tribe to disappear like this. Noah hesitated for a moment, tugging at the corner of Lorraine's clothes. Captain, they have no money. If they have no money, they can sell their property or their people. Although the Roma people have a bad reputation, they have always had a good market in Europe as slaves and dancers, but their only property is caravans. As for people, even if 50 or 60 people are sold at a high price, they are not worth £100,000. Then what should we do? Lorraine frowned. The Roma people have no place to live. Even if they write an IOU, I dare not trust their integrity. 50 or 60 slaves and a dozen caravans. It seems that we can only take what we can get back. Captain, can you ask them to atone their sins? Use work to offset the debt, just like deceiving the Spanish nobles as you requested. At this point, who can still not understand that everything is a game? Lorraine's dominance frightened the three women, but Noah's betrayal made them even more heartbroken. The Ramsala tribe has been wandering in Spain for more than 40 years. They were living well, but if they cheated the local nobles, they would have to wander in a strange place again. How much effort and price would they have to pay to be accepted in the new place? The older cousin gritted her teeth and looked at Noah with fire in her eyes. Noah. Don't forget that you are Roma. Yes. Noah stood behind Lorraine with her chest puffed out, her little face flushed, and hatred surging. I have never forgotten that I am Roma. When I arrive in a new environment, I will try my best to let the new master know my value. What about you? The witch is the leader of the tribe and is as noble as the patriarch, but you expelled me. That's because you don't deserve it. I deserve it. Noah took out a crystal ball and held it to her chest with both hands. I am the heir to the crystal ball of destiny. I was chosen by my mother, the previous witch, and fate. Destiny has already told us the result. It's you, who don't deserve it. Chapter 34, Mr. England, the Eloquent One. Facing the rising sun, the Atis Beauty slowly returned to the harbor. Noah, who had not slept all night, stood on the side of the ship with a sad face. Lorraine walked over and stood beside her with his hands behind his back. Noah then leaned her head over and rested it on Lorraine's arm. She was very petite, and even her figure was not very Roma. With a height of about 1.5 meters, she could not even reach Lorraine's shoulder, so she could only lean on his arm. Lorraine stretched out his hand to hold her so that she could lean more comfortably. Do you regret it? They are my people. Uncle Sam secretly hid cheese for me when I was a child, and Grandma Pita always gave me shortbread. And little Erlen, he always said that he would be my exclusive musician, but I didn't dare to dance in crowded places, so he has never played the guitar in the square until now. Noah spoke in a low voice, trying to hide her head. Her voice became muffled, and it was audible, but there was no joy or anger. They are about to wander, she said. Roma people like to wander, but they are also afraid of wandering. When we arrive in a new place, people will always treat us as wizards, thieves, robbers, and people will die. Lorraine was speechless, and he knew that Noah didn't need him to speak. Noah continued, "Captain, please don't lie to Viscount Alfonso. My cousins wanted to kill me, but Uncle Sam, Grandma Pitta, and little Erlyn, they never thought of hurting me. I was able to escape because little Erlyn reported the news, and it was Uncle Sam who told him we would never deceive the Viscount. Honesty is the foundation of business. Once there is deception, the business will not last long." "Really?" Noah's eyes lit up. Lorraine smiled and rubbed her head, and White Ear also came in to playfully let Lorraine rub its little head together. Lorraine teased White Ear's round chin and whispered, "Noah, never question your captain again. Honesty is the foundation of navigation. Once there's deception, the ship will be rejected by Noton." "What is Noton?" "It's the graveyard of all ships, the paradise of all sailors." Lorraine pointed to her heart. "But she's not in heaven. She's here, wherever pansies bloom." The ship docked, and the grand plan to cultivate a friendship with Viscount Alfonso began. Noah returned to the Ramzilla tribe, posing as a witch, awaiting the Viscountess's summons. This was only temporary. After the divination, she would return to the ship. Since she couldn't expel her 3 cousins, she could only expel herself. Lorraine couldn't leave her crew in danger. Besides making Henna work harder to protect her, she also forced her 3 cousins to swear a curse on the crystal ball of fate. A ridiculous, yet effective, tactic. The Roma may believe in any number of gods, but at heart they are atheists. Their only faith is in fate, which they listen to through crystal balls and tarot cards. This is very similar to Lorraine. Having lived 2 lives, he is also atheist at heart, believing in Jord, partly a habit bestowed upon him by little Lorraine, and partly out of remembrance of Helena. Fortunately, the root of his ancestral faith is remembrance, otherwise, Lorraine wouldn't even know if he was still a whaler, let alone if he could tap into the power within his veins. Everything proceeded smoothly. 3 days later, Noah sent word that Viscount Alfonso had returned. They would meet with the Viscount and Viscountess at 10 o'clock tomorrow to finalize the details for the divination for the day after tomorrow. Lorraine smiled faintly upon receiving this news, and having Pierce prepare his formal attire and the infallible cloisonne, he finished his logbook early, turned out the lights, and retired to sleep. The next morning at 9 o'clock, Lorraine and Pierce, dressed in formal attire, arrived early at Viscount Alfonso's house. Thanks to their cloisonne, they waited only half an hour before being received by the Viscount. The Viscount sat on the lawn under a parasol, wearing only a vest and shirt, no tailcoat or wig. Upon meeting Lorraine, his first words were, "This exquisite oriental porcelain has bought you 15 minutes. Gentlemen, you may speak freely until the end of time." Lorraine wasted the 15 minutes, bought for £300, without hesitation. He had no chance of convincing Viscount Alfonso in the first place. A black marketeer, a family outcast, and an Englishman, Lorraine perfectly met all the criteria for a Spanish gentleman, errands, but no favoritism. These qualities served Lorraine so well that Viscount Alfonso never took his eyes off his cloisonne teacup for even a second during his 15 minutes. When Lorraine finished his speech, Viscount Alfonso set the cup down with a gentle smile. "Mr. England, eloquent and eloquent, I admit, you almost convinced me." He closed the lid and absent-mindedly played with a ring on his finger. 30% of the profits from the port of Bermeo are very tempting. As you grow, it can be upgraded to 30% of the profits from the Greater Basque region. Even the future is taken into consideration. What a pity, he shook his head regretfully. I am a noble. Before considering the interests of my family, I must first consider the interests of Duke Victoria and the interests of His Majesty the King of Madrid. You should have seen that Bermeo is an official port that accepts black market traders. We operate as a black market port and create a comfortable environment for black market traders, but we are not a black market port, and I am not a wealthy local tycoon who relies on illegal profits to maintain a decent life. So, at this point, the butler came up and whispered to Viscount Alfonso. The Basque dialect was obscure, but Lorraine guessed what was being said. It was nothing more than Noah's arrival. As expected, after the butler finished speaking, the Viscount stood up with a smile and extended his hand to Lorraine. Exquisite oriental porcelain and the English gentleman who is good at listening. You gave me a bright morning and afternoon, and I hope you can be in a happy mood one day. However, even the most pleasant meeting has to end. Now is the time. Lorraine also stood up, shook hands with Viscount Alfonso and said goodbye with a smile, watching him walk towards the mansion, but he had no intention of leaving. The Viscount walked away for a while, then turned back with dissatisfaction. Mr. England, are you going to ruin this precious first meeting? No, sir. Lorraine bowed slightly under the umbrella. I have one more word of farewell, and then I will leave naturally. Oh, Carmen Xavier. What, Miss Carmen Xavier? Lorraine nodded to Viscount Alfonso. I don't know if I called the beautiful lady's name wrong. You know, the pronunciation of Spanish is a bit awkward for the English. If I accidentally caused you trouble, I can apologize. Viscount Alfonso narrowed his eyes. Surprising Mr. England, it seems that you are well prepared. As a young businessman who is just starting out, only diligence can make up for your shortcomings. The two laughed at the same time. The butler waited for a moment, then noticed that Mr. Alfonso was talking about sex again. He approached with embarrassment. Sir, my lady's guests. Viscount Alfonso's expression suddenly changed, his face ferocious and cannibalistic. Let those lowly, filthy flamenco people wait. Can't you see I'm entertaining guests? Get lost. P.S. The Basque Country, formerly the Kingdom of Navarre, was annexed by France and Spain, encompassing 4 provinces in Spain and 3 in France. Due to its homogeneous ethnicity, strong cohesion, and aggressive fighting spirit, it enjoyed a unique degree of autonomy for a long period of history and boasts the only non-Indo-European language in Europe, Basque. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 35. Don Juan. Lorraine and Viscount Alfonso returned to their seats beneath the umbrella, signaling a return to the starting point. Perhaps even more than the starting point. The obstructing cloisonne was removed by the servants, and the small round table was replaced with 2 cups of fragrant English black tea, accompanied by thin cucumber sandwiches, strawberry shortcake, and English muffins. While these were supposed to be delicacies at 4 in the afternoon, this was Spain, and Viscount Alfonso was merely a wealthy local tycoon who made a decent living through a legal business. Lorraine felt he couldn't ask for more. He politely ate a small piece of the sandwich and chatted with the Viscount about the weather and rumors that Grand Duchess Victoria might have athlete's foot. Halfway through the tea, the Viscount asked, "What should I call you, Mr. England, Lorraine?" Lorraine put down his teacup and crossed his fingers on his knees. Lorraine Andrew Drake. Drake, it's the Drake you remember. Tavistock is my hometown. Viscount Alfonso couldn't help laughing. Francis Drake was the cause of the decline of the port of Bilbao, and now his descendants are coming to Bermeo to pan for gold. Lorraine spread his hands helplessly. As an Eastern proverb says, those who plant trees will enjoy the shade. Money is thrown into what? Basically, money is thrown into the water, and one day it will float back to where it started with the ocean currents. Viscount Alfonso was greatly impressed. I didn't expect that the mysterious Orientals would be so proficient in the ocean. They know everything. The only problem is that they know too much, so they don't know what they really want. It is undoubtedly wonderful to use the mysterious East as the end of the chat, especially since Viscount Alfonso learned an Eastern proverb. He smiled and thanked Lorraine, wiped his mouth, and suddenly said, Mr. Drake, you are threatening me. No, 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 you misunderstood. Lorraine waved his hands repeatedly. I have no intention of threatening you, and I didn't even bother to inquire about Miss Xavier's appearance and residence. Just to have a better conversation with you, I found some friends and was lucky enough to listen to a beautiful and moving love story. Really, I am English, sir. Although your country and my country, your ancestors and my ancestors do not get along harmoniously, but at least we live in the same world and are influenced by modern civilization, a civilized gentleman, etiquette, politeness, not casually inquiring about the details of a beautiful lady, let alone taking away someone's love and forcing them to do something right. The two sides were silent for a long time, looking at each other, neither dodging nor avoiding. After a long time, Viscount Alfonso smiled, picked up the teapot and filled Lorraine's cup with his own hands. I have to say that you have successfully made me change my prejudice against the English. Thank you for your kindness, sir. Lorraine leaned forward in his chair. Madam and cousin, Viscount must be feeling uncomfortable. The Viscount smiled bitterly. I still love my wife. Although this sounds a bit strange, the truth is that I care about this marriage more than she knows. What about Miss Xavier? Young? Beautiful. She is very similar to the lady when she was young, confident, beautiful, proud, reserved, loyal to the Lord, and intelligent. Viscount Alfonso showed a nostalgic expression. After that serious illness, the lady changed a lot, becoming suspicious, jealous and mean. I know that a child is the only way for us to ease the relationship, but God is unwilling to give him to us. Then you met Miss Xavier? The younger version of the lady, the Viscount gave Lorraine a knowing smile. No, in fact, we knew each other before the lady fell ill. If Carmen had not insisted on obeying the doctrine and maintaining holiness before marriage, I might have picked this delicate flower at that romantic ball. The romance of Spanish gentlemen is always more subtle and reserved than that of the French. Lorraine praised reluctantly and recited the poem softly in an oral tone. Love. In this secluded wild forest, security and ecstasy are intertwined. This is the territory of your paradise, and you have become a true god. This poem touched Viscount Alfonso's heart, and he was very surprised. I didn't expect that Mr. Drake was actually a poet. I was just moved by your story again, and I was inspired. Lorraine raised his teacup to salute the Viscount. Viscount, I have prepared a gift for you. Isn't it Oriental porcelain? No, no matter how precious the porcelain is, it is a dead object, and my gift is Miss Xavier. Carmen, fortune tellers are quite rigid, but thankfully, the civilized world has taught us how to persuade them, hasn't it? Lorraine took a sip of tea and stood up. I've kept you here for a long time. I hope we can be friends, true friends, next time we meet. Viscount Alfonso sat there in a daze, forgetting even to stand up and say goodbye. Lorraine walked out of the Viscount's estate like a true gentleman, and around a corner, Henna appeared silently behind him. Is it going well? He has porcelain in front of him, gold in the future, and I even arranged a damn love life for him. With business going this far, what could he possibly be dissatisfied with? Henna nodded quietly. It's going well. What kind of man is the Viscount? Lorraine looked disdainful. I thought I was well adapted to the aristocratic view of love, but only today did I realize I was too young. Huh? Sergio Cecilic Alfonso, he's not only a nouveau riche, he's also a complete scumbag. The next day, a purple tent was pitched on the lawn of the Alfonso estate. Lorraine was dressed in Roma attire, a flowery dress and square hat. He carried a large box like a laborer and sported an incredibly long mustache. His dark hair made him stand out among the men, and his deep brown eyes were indistinguishable from the more typical black eyes of the Roma. He was indeed a bit taller, standing out from the crowd. But that didn't matter. After all, the protagonist in this case was a woman, and the men were just background. He passed Viscount Alfonso, carrying a box, and accidentally knocked over his servant. Taking advantage of the Viscount's scolding, he slipped something into his trouser pocket. The Viscount froze for a moment, a look of astonishment on his face. Lorraine gave the Viscount a sly smile and mouthed, "A small gift, my friend." He then pulled a mahogany box from the box, cradled it in both hands, and walked into the tent. The Viscount quickly found an excuse to walk to a deserted corner and reached into his pocket. He pulled out a Suzhou embroidered handkerchief. It depicted a handsome Oriental man sitting cross-legged under a tree, embracing a beautiful Oriental woman. His expression solemn. Inside the handkerchief was a slip of paper, inscribed in beautiful cursive script, Liu Xiaowei, the most prestigious gentleman in Eastern legend. Only reserved the noble men like you and him could maintain their holy and pure love in the face of beauty and desire. Tears welled up in the Viscount's eyes as he clutched the handkerchief. A kindred spirit, he muttered, gazing at the tent. The mysterious East, the mysterious. Mr. Drake, P.S. That line is from Don Juan. Don Juan is a narrative poem by Lord Byron, a renowned 19th-century English poet. He wrote Don Juan in the 1810s. So, at that time, this great and lustful narrative poem hadn't yet emerged from the poet's belly. Chapter 36 Witches and Tarot. The tent was filled with magical colors. Noah, draped in a nearly transparent golden veil, covered her head and face, revealing only a pair of bright, dark eyes and a small, straight nose. She knelt upright in the center of the tent. Opposite her, a middle-aged woman knelt beneath a black veil. Lorraine couldn't see her face, nor did she need to. Between them stood a large, golden-proportioned low ebony table. 22 candles were placed at odd, irregular intervals in the four corners. 2 gleaming hollow daggers lay horizontally on the short sides. 4 conch-shaped crystal cups filled with water sat at the corners. Near Noah, a deep purple crystal ball of fate rested on a small stand. Purple tent, purple crystal ball. No other color was visible in the tent except a bright yellow candlelight, reflected in the crystal ball through various reflections. Smudged by hair, It cast a strange, sometimes darker, hue across the tent, creating a transition between purple and orange. Lorraine respectfully handed the box to the lady, placing it on the ground. He exchanged a glance with Noah before silently retreating into the shadows of the tent, as silent as a shadow. Noah smiled faintly. "Madam, please open the box and take out a major arcana. With your prayer to God, wash the silver cards on the table." The lady did as she was told, removing from the box a magnificent tarot deck of 22 cards, crafted from a genuine silver alloy and colored with mineral pigments. This was the major arcana Noah had mentioned. She began shuffling the cards, reverently spreading them out, then gathering them together and placing them flat in the center of the table. Noah reached out and gently stroked the tops of the cards. Without touching them, the folded cards spread out like a feather fan. This magical scene nearly brought the lady to her knees. Her breathing became heavy, and just as she was about to ask another question, Noah suddenly said, "Madam, meditate. I am only the mouthpiece of God. All glory belongs to my Lord." The lady instantly calmed down. She looked at Noah gratefully and whispered, "Priest, do I need to speak my mind to the questions I have? You only need to speak to the Lord. He will tell me the answers, and they are in the cards you turn up." The lady, with even greater reverence, trembling, selected 3 cards from the deck and laid them face down on the table. Noah brushed them with the gauze of his sleeve, turning them upside down before the lady in order: the High Priestess, the Empress, and the Tower, all reversed. Generally, reversed cards represent error and negation, and the lady's expression changed. But Noah's voice remained as gentle and soothing as ever. She said, "It seems you have encountered difficulties, lady. Now, with hope, tell the Lord your thoughts and wishes. Draw 3 more cards." The lady took a deep breath, her outstretched hand trembling even more violently. She selected 3 more cards and placed them neatly beneath the original 3. Noah, as always, lifted them with the gauze of his sleeve, his movements gentle and full of mystical qualities, unpredictable and unpredictable. The Hermit and the Lovers in the upright position, and the Pope in the reversed position. She smiled slightly, stretched out her bare hands, and gathered the remaining cards into a pile, still arranging them in the air, still not touching any of the cards. The lady knew that the divination was over, and her breathing became heavy again. Noah watched her quietly, clasped his hands, and began to stroke the crystal ball of fate in a strange rhythm. The deep purple crystal ball flickered in her hands, stained with psychedelic colors. The candles went out one by one, and soon only 6 were left. The candlesticks were written with Roman numerals, and, which happened to be the order of the 6 cards. Noah sighed tiredly and said in a floating and ethereal voice, "I know your questions and expectations, madam." The lady was completely conquered and lowered her noble head deeply in front of Noah. "Please guide me, priest. Your love is facing challenges. It is changing. Your reason does not agree with this change, but you can't find a solution in your heart. I want a child, but God took away my right. Don't panic, madam. The Lord will close the door and open the window." Noah's voice became more and more distant. "You need to reflect and ask what you think deep in your heart, even if it goes against tradition and goes against your upbringing. The formation of a new relationship takes time, but it will also bring hope to your life. What should I do, priest? You will have a healthy and intelligent child. She was originally conceived in your blood, but now she has drifted to a branch along the river of blood. He is your child. Don't let him slip away from your hand. Go and catch him. Go and catch him." The candle suddenly went out. The remaining candlelight suddenly extinguished simultaneously, plunging the gloomy tent into complete darkness. Lorraine immediately pulled aside the heavy barriers, letting in the sunlight, revealing everything. The cards on the table vanished, both those the lady had drawn and those not. They were piled back up, and the mahogany box was neatly opened. Noah slumped weakly over the table, her chest panting heavily, her face a strange flush. She still wore a compassionate smile as she spoke slowly, each word carefully, to the lady, "Madam, may you find the right path and a happy life." Everything was on track. On the 3rd day of the divination, the beautiful Miss Carmen Xavier was taken from her farm in the countryside by the lady. Under the guise of caring for the frail lady, she brazenly moved into the Viscount's estate. It remained unknown whether the 3 of them would eventually share the same courtyard. Would Carmen Xavier usurp the throne, or would a lady fulfill her wish by surviving and bearing a child through her surrogacy? At the Viscount's introduction, Lorraine attended a cocktail reception at Romeo's upper crust, where he struck up a lively conversation with the 6 gentlemen of the board. The next day, He resubmitted his application for permanent residency to the board, and was granted this status by a 7-vote vote. 2 days later, still at Mr. Frey's tacky exchange, he sold his glassware for an average of £5.5 per box, and then bought a shipment of truly premium American tobacco at £1.2 per kilogram. His vision of a triangular trade route through northwest Europe had finally been dredged. From then on, the Atisbel would sail along the lucrative short sea route between Bermeo, Elgin, and Stavanger, earning Lorraine and his future Chamber of Commerce lucrative profits. New World goods, Scottish spirits, and Nordic luxuries would become the capital he needed to launch his voyages in this era, earning him his first pot of gold. On a beautiful, windy morning, the Atis Beauty slowly left the tranquil harbor of Bermeo, turned around in the vast Bay of Biscay, hoisted the sails, and pointed its bow towards the distant British Isles. Lorraine, Noah, and White Ear stood side by side on the stern deck, watching the Roma people waving goodbye from the dock gradually disappear into the distant horizon. Lorraine rubbed Noah's black hair fiercely. "You told them that they don't have to leave Spain, right?" Noah wrinkled his pretty nose. "Roma people like to wander, but they don't like to go to unfamiliar places. We are a group of people who love freedom, not a group of people who have had enough of life. You also left all the divination fees to them, right? Wandering requires money. Without money, they can only steal, be hated by the locals, and wander to strange places, but they wanted to kill you, didn't they? But in the end we made up." Noah rubbed his round chin with white ears, and his big eyes smiled into crescents. "My cousins gave up the crystal ball of fate and returned my dance dress, organ and silver tarot to me. They prayed to fate together, hoping that I would always have good luck in my future wanderings. This is all thanks to the captain, little girl who easily forgets grudges." Lorraine looked at her with a helpless smile. "I guess your silver tarot is mixed with iron, and the gold was for divination is embroidered with magnets, right? This is a secret." Lorraine did not comment and continued, "But I don't understand how you can guarantee that the lady will draw those 6 cards, and arrange them in the front and back according to your requirements. I thought you used the card-changing technique to hide the cards in the golden gauze, but when I carried you out that day, I found that your gauze was so thin that it couldn't cover anything, even your body." Noah's face turned red in an instant. He hesitated and twisted his sleeves, and whispered, "Divination is the revelation given by fate. Don't try to pursue its techniques, because it is neither the past nor represents the future. I suddenly feel that you might be a real witch, witches and black cats." "Tut tut tut." Lorraine was amused by his own thoughts. He waved his hand, turned around and said goodbye. "White Ears, it's time to eat. Next, we have to set up a Chamber of Commerce, Volume 1, I want to smell the smell of the sea." And, the opening of the triangular trade means that Lorraine officially has a stable business channel, and the small black Chamber of Commerce has also entered the accumulation period. So here, the first volume, I Want to Smell the Smell of the Sea, ends. Thank you all for your support. I thought I'd written a super niche book, set in a niche era and genre, but the response has been far better than I expected. I'm overjoyed. Wow, a new volume, a new adventure. The Drake Merchant Guild needs your support, as does this somewhat unorthodox, pseudo-orthodox historical work. Please vote, add it to your collection, recommend it, and I'd love to see your reviews and feedback. I'm so grateful. See you in the next volume, Privateer of the North Sea. Chapter 37, For Whom the Bell Tolls. Western Europe was tranquil, while North America was turbulent. On April 19, 1775, British troops in Portland were ordered to Concord to confiscate a cache of munitions. Passing the meadows of Lexington, they stumbled upon militiamen engaged in shooting practice. The American Revolutionary War began with a slap in the face. The Battle of Lexington cost the British 286 casualties and resulted in a crushing defeat. On June 14, 1775, the Continental Army was organized, and the following day, George Washington assumed command of the Continental Army. On July 4, 1776, the Continental Congress issued the Declaration of Independence, proclaiming the birth of the United States. Great Britain proved remarkably clumsy in the face of this turbulent revolution. For one thing, the Navy had been unable to select a suitable successor since the previous admiral of the New World Fleet, Sir Elijah Drake, had died unexpectedly on his way to his post. The powerful New World Fleet languished in a state of disarray and leaderlessness for a long time, finally receiving its new commander, Admiral Sir Peter Parker, in mid-1777. Meanwhile, the colonial army was mired in a different kind of disarray. In early 1776, John Burgoyne assumed command of Canada, challenging William Howe, then Commander-in-Chief of North America, and successfully split the already small British army in two. To maintain harmony with their peers, the two further divided the army, devising the massive Partition of New England campaign, with three separate forces advancing towards Albany, New York. This was a farcical military operation. With three unconnected forces, Colonel Barry St. Leger, with his small forces, was quickly driven back by the Yankees. Commander Howe changed his mind mid-stride and instead sailed through Pennsylvania, capturing Philadelphia, the seat of the Continental Congress. Only the steadfast Burgoyne, with his mere 7,000 men, persevered in advancing towards his goal. His troops first captured Fort Ticonderoga, then collided head-on with the main American force in the Hudson River. Isolated and defenseless, they ran out of ammunition and food. On October 17, 1777, John Burgoyne led his troops in surrendering to the American forces north of Saratoga Springs, a victory known to history as the Battle of Saratoga. The Battle of Saratoga changed everything. Beginning in February 1778, France, the Netherlands, and Spain successively recognized American independence, and massive fleets sailed for North America. Overnight, Great Britain's enemies went from being a handful of rural folk, unworthy of the name, to encompass half the world. The early spring trade winds swept across the vast Atlantic, bringing news of the war back to Europe. Here, the heartland of the maritime powers, kings continued to chatter and jokingly maintain a final restraint, but the clarion call of war had already sounded in the merchant world. April 1778, the Black Harbor of Elgin. The Atis Beauty slowly docked in the peaceful harbor. Pierce, hands in his trousers, swayed down the boat, just like Lorraine had done back then. He flicked a shilling, which landed precisely in the pilot's hand. 2 years had passed, and the young Pierce had grown taller and darker. His every move was a stark resemblance to Lorraine, even the faint smile that curled his lips was identical. "Nice flag signal, Mr. Med," the pilot, Med, smiled, collected the shilling, retracted the two flags, and rubbed Pierce's head. "Little Pierce, how does it feel to be captain for the first time?" Pierce's shoulders slumped. He said with a doleful face, "Mr. Med, asking questions when you already know the answer isn't a gentleman's thing to do, eh? Knowing, isn't Mr. Drake on his day off?" "I am," Pierce said, his brows furrowed. "But the situation at sea these days, if I'm not here, Hannah will definitely be there. With her at the helm, even if I'm the admiral, won't I still have to obey her?" As he spoke, Hannah disembarked. 2 years of seafaring hadn't changed her much. She still wore her smock and hood, her demeanor still cold and indifferent. She had only grown taller, and even next to the tall man, she didn't look shorter, just thinner and lithe. She leaped from the bow and stern, the 4 or 5 meter height seeming nothing to her. Frowning, she walked over to Med and held out a small, oil paper wrapped package from under her smock. Hyde felt a surge of unease, staring blankly at Hina. "We found Mr. Pimmon's ship on our route. Only wreckage remains, no survivors. This is his logbook, old Pimmon." Hina nodded silently. Med took a deep breath and took the oil bag with both hands. "I need to hand the remains to the management committee immediately. Ms. Yesla, please follow me." "Little Pierce, excuse me." He led Hina away at a rapid pace, cursing as he walked. "Fourth permanent resident this month. Has the world gone mad?" Just as Pierce and Mr. Hyde had said, the situation at sea had been dire in recent months. The war in the New World had escalated. Colonial troops from Britain, France, the Netherlands, and Spain clashed across the newly born American land. From sea to land, there was no peace. The situation in Europe was more stable than in the New World. Here, on the mainland, every move affected the fundamentals. The government dared not act rashly, and maintained a superficial harmony. For the black market traders, this was also the worst possible scenario. With the state's connivance, privateers were unleashed. The hunt had begun. Overnight, the number of pirates swarming the shipping lanes more than doubled. Endless pirates drifted the seas, and the outnumbered and underpowered black market traders were their ideal targets. Robbery, murder, body dumping, shipwrecks. In the past few months, Pierce had lost count of the number of tragic reports he had heard. In Bermeo, in Stavanger, and most often, in Elgin. Ding dong. Ding dong. Ding dong. Ding dong. The bell tower on the Boulevard of Flowers rang out again, a short, hurried death knell, signaling that the board had identified Mr. Pimen's remains. The death knell symbolized the loss of another free-spirited, optimistic, and courageous black market trader stationed in Hong Kong. According to Mr. Med, Pimen is the fourth this month, the next one, or the next after that. When will it be our turn? Pierce bit his lip. Lorraine was powerful, Hannah was powerful, even blushing at the sight of anyone. And the unassuming Noah was far more powerful than the average person. But in the face of relentless artillery fire, how much value could individual strength truly hold? The Drake group was now too weak. They possessed only 4 standard cog-type cargo ships, and Lorraine had gritted his teeth and equipped each with 4 medium-range 6-pounder guns. These guns could barely penetrate a ship's hull or rip through a mast. Their sole purpose was to fire scattershot onto the deck, hoping to ignite the ammunition piled there or injure stray sailors. Recently, Pierce had repeatedly recalled the scene of visiting the Gemini in Stavanger. A 20-gun brigantine-class high-speed ship was neither to defeat nor to escape. An encounter with one would inevitably lead the Drake group to annihilation, with the ship destroyed and all on board perished. They had even faced a near-death experience. Over 40 days ago, on their last trade route, they had sailed out of Bakkenfjord, laden with Nordic furs, when they collided head-on with a Dutch-flagged brigantine. If it weren't for the unexpected, the powerful Viking Skull pirates, on their way to Stavanger for supplies, had dislodged the Dutch gunboat that had taken an offensive stance. Could the Drake group have escaped? Brother, what are you hesitating about? Pierce stared intently at the bronze bell ringing in the distance, took a deep breath, and quickened his pace. He'd made up his mind. Today, he had to convince Lorraine to buy a ship. Even if it meant sacrificing everything the Drake group had accumulated over the past 2 years, he had to buy a real gunboat. Otherwise, they were doomed. Chapter 38 Conditions for Establishing a Chamber of Commerce. A rising star in the last 2 years, the Drake Trading Company's trading office in Elgin is located at 4 Emil Street, a fork in the busy Flower Street, just 100 meters from the small theater where the auction takes place. Standing outside the theater, a large teakwood sign points to a charming building with red brick and black tiles. The building has 3 floors. The first floor houses the trading hall, where glass cases display items based on inventory. Currently, they display Nordic swords and furs, as well as New World cocoa and tobacco. Small transactions are settled on the spot, while larger ones or pre-orders are handled in the reception room at the back for further negotiation. This is also true of the Drake Trading Company. The second floor, with 2 suites, houses Hannah on the left and Noah on the right. Further up, on the 3rd floor, lies Lorraine's office and bedroom. Pierce and Kren do not live in the building. Behind the building stood the merchant group's warehouse and a separate annex building, where the 2 boys lived. The annex building had a generous courtyard, perfect for Pierce's martial arts and physical training, as well as for Kren's occasional large-scale crafts and daily design work. It wasn't exactly a relaxed environment. Honestly, Lorraine had made a considerable fortune in the past 2 years. But the merchant group wasn't wealthy enough to separate public and private affairs, and living at the exchange was a matter of saving wherever possible. After all, the group was still in its infancy, and everyone didn't have many days off. Pierce strode into the exchange. His face, devoid of any trace of innocence, was furrowed with the frown of a teenager facing emotional distress. The young clerk ran up with a smile. "Vice President, Jenna, where's my brother, Mr. Drake? He's meeting a client in the reception room. I'll go find him." Ignoring the embarrassment on Miss Hannah's face, Pierce pushed the door open hastily and shouted as soon as he entered, "Brother." The 4 people who were chatting all looked up, 3 in surprise, and 1 dissatisfied. The dissatisfied one was naturally Lorraine. Lorraine, who was 18 years old, was taller than he was 2 years ago, and was basically the same height as Kren. In addition, his growth had slowed down in the past 2 years, and his well-proportioned muscles were finally starting to show some shape. He looked a little more sturdy, at least he no longer gave people the impression of being thin. This also made him look particularly majestic when he was dissatisfied. Pierce's heart skipped a beat, and he cried out that it was bad. What are the requirements for a gentleman in England? Always calm, always cool, always confident, sir. Look at yourself. Lorraine looked at him sullenly, speaking slowly. Go and get ready. This meeting is important, huh? Yes, little Pierce scurried off, dashing back to the main building as fast as he could. He showered and changed into a full formal suit, complete with shirt, vest, bowtie, trousers, leather shoes, and tailcoat. Since he wasn't even a teenager, his shirt still had lace on it, and he had to smooth out the wrinkles at the cuffs to avoid looking frivolous. If he was frivolous, why not just remove the lace? He muttered to himself, his face expressionless. After getting dressed, he returned to the living room and gently knocked at the door. "Sir, I'm ready, come in." Pierce gently pushed the door open, stepped past the others, and sat down on the small stool behind Lorraine, sitting upright. There were 4 other people in the room besides him. Lorraine, who had begun to assume a majestic presence, was a sight to behold. There was also Ramos, the agent of Mr. Piddock of Port Elgin, and Eddie, the agent of Sir Garman of Stavanger. The only woman in the room was one Pierce had never seen before. She had dark hair, dark cheeks, and deep-set eyes. She looked like a Castilian, or Spanish, with some Moorish ancestry. She was young, perhaps around 20, and wore a bright red dress that revealed a large expanse of snow-white skin on her chest and arms. She was beautiful, sensual, and graceful. Lorraine tapped gently on the back of the sofa. "Miss Xavier is meeting Pierce for the first time. Let me introduce you, Pierce Artis, shareholder and vice-chairman of the Drake Merchants Guild, my seaman trainee, and owner of the Artis Beauty, Carmen Xavier, Viscount Alfonso's agent and our partner in Bermeo. She's incredibly capable. In just 8 months, she's already increased Bermeo line profits by 30%. Pierce quickly stood and bowed to Carmen. For some reason, he felt like he'd heard the name somewhere before. 2 years seemed like such a long time, so long that Pierce couldn't even remember his country cousin. 2 years ago, Carmen had moved into the Viscount's estate, chasing love. She was obsessed with status and insisted on chastity before marriage, but the Viscountess only wanted her child, using both explicit and implicit pressure to make her his mistress. Exhausted, she confronted the Viscount. However, the Viscount, preoccupied with women, scoffed at Carmen's expectations. This led to conflict between the two parties, and their love story came to an end. This long, fruitless love affair had, after all, lasted 5 years. Perhaps it was guilt, or perhaps it was the trust built between her and the Viscount through their long time together. In short, she transformed herself, becoming Lorraine's employee as the Viscount's agent, and officially took over all of the caravan's operations in Spain 8 months ago. She also demonstrated unparalleled business and social talent. Carmen Xavier had now become the most beautiful flower, admired and coveted by everyone in Bilbao's upper class. Pierce didn't remember her, and Lorraine had no intention of mentioning that hurtful past. She simply continued. "Pierce is a shareholder of the caravan. He was originally away at sea, and I didn't expect him to return. Now that he's here, I suggest that he be invited to participate in this discussion." His inquiring gaze swept over the 3 partners, and all 3 generously agreed. Pierce, sensing the formality of the meeting, said awkwardly, "Brother, I can't really help you much. I might not even understand, just listen." Lorraine soothed him gently. "This is all part of your training. Don't forget, you're not just a seaman, you're also a businessman." Pierce nodded heavily. Having clarified Pierce's eligibility for the meeting, Lorraine crossed her fingers. "Let me briefly summarize what we talked about earlier so Pierce has an idea," he said. After 2 years and 1 month of development, the Drake Merchant Corps now has assets of £11,800, 3 trading houses, and 4 Kirk-class ships, namely the Atis Beauty, the Beverly Merchant, the Cavil Drunkard, and the Northern Knight. In the past year, the Merchant Corps average monthly trade volume was £2,900, with a profit of £1,600. After dividing the profit by 3 parts, the Merchant Corps made a profit of £1,120, and because of Miss Xavier's outstanding performance, we have made significant improvements in the variety and quality of our goods, and have established trade relations with several genuine chambers of commerce. In addition, 6 months ago, when Mr. Piddock competed for the seat of the Mowbray County Councillor, we provided him with a political donation of £2,000 and received a generous return because he succeeded. At this point, Lorraine took a deep breath. "Half a month ago, I went to London and obtained all the requirements for registering a formal Chamber of Commerce in England. First, submit a formal written application to the Trade Association. Second, a deposit of £1,000. Third, recommendations from no fewer than 3 gentlemen. Fourth, recommendations from 3 chambers of commerce with trading rights in England. I'll write the application, And we have the money. I've already got the recommendations from the Chambers of Commerce. As for the gentleman recommendations, Mr. Piddock secured 2 for us from his parliamentary friends, and he can also write one himself. Drake has all the conditions for establishing a Chamber of Commerce, so I'm ready to officially register and establish the Chamber of Commerce in England. Chapter 39, Revisiting the Old Place. Establishing a Chamber of Commerce has many advantages. First, it can expand the scope of triangular trade from just 3 unlicensed ports to all officially civilian ports. This, of course, requires obtaining trade permission from the country or autonomous region. Second, it can enjoy statutory tax rates far lower than those in unlicensed ports. As trade volume increases and the Chamber of Commerce expands, further benefits such as tax rebates and exemptions can be enjoyed. Third, it can sign legally protected trade contracts, ensuring trade security. Most importantly, with tensions escalating in northwestern Europe, the Chamber of Commerce urgently needs truly armed merchant ships. Armed merchant ships are gunboats. Thicker hulls, better materials, and the artillery they carry, these aren't readily available. Every country has its own secret recipes for shipbuilding and cannon production. To prevent the outflow of technology, laws often prohibit unqualified individuals or groups from purchasing ships and cannons. This is the case in the United Kingdom. Only domestic chambers of commerce can purchase ships and cannons through formal channels. Regions with developed maritime industries even impose further restrictions to maintain their technological leadership in their fields. Of course, ships and guns of dubious origin could be purchased on the black market, but the price was. A brand new brigantine cost only £4,000 in the UK, while a well-prepared second-hand ship would cost at least £5,000 on the black market. There was a price, but no demand. The price of guns was even more outrageous. Take the medium-range 6-pounder Lorraine had bought a while ago. This entry-level gun had an official list price of only £150. He bought 16 of them, and the average price per gun was £400. Lorraine did the math. A brand new brigantine cost £4,000, and the standard configuration of 10 9-pounder cannons cost £3,500, 8 6-pounder cannons cost £1,600, and 2 6-pounder cannons cost £200, for a total of £9,300. Buying a second-hand brigantine on the black market for £5,000, and 26-pounder guns for £8,000, for a total of £13,000. Spending more money, buying a warship. Establishing a Chamber of Commerce might have been just a future and an ambition for Lorraine back then, but now it's a matter of life and death. The matter finally became urgent. With a life-or-death determination, Lorraine recruited partners, unyielding to opposition and fully prepared to secure support. They began to discuss the details. First, Lorraine would register the Chamber of Commerce in Plymouth. Plymouth was chosen not because it was the Drake family's ancestral home, but because, backed by the Channel Fleet, the local shipbuilding and cannon casting industries were world-leading. With the money, any class of ship and any grade of cannon could be ordered there, and high-end flintlock cannons were only available to local chambers of commerce, crucial to their development. Second, reasonable concessions would be made to the partners. Lorraine did not intend to sell his shares in the Chamber of Commerce. When the Drake Chamber of Commerce was still small, giving too little would displease the partners, and too much would displease Lorraine. Councillor Piddock would receive 30% of the Chamber's future profits in Scotland, Sir Garman in Norway, and Viscount Alfonso in the Basque region. Sharing in the profits was their right, but securing local trade licenses and coordinating the complexities of the Chamber's development were their responsibilities. The 3 authorized representatives expressed their satisfaction, and a new partnership agreement was signed on the spot. Party A was the soon-to-be-established Drake Chamber of Commerce, and Party B was 3 prestigious families in their respective regions. The third component was equity in the Chamber of Commerce. Lorraine would take 90% and promise 30% to his core crew, the unpaid crew members. For now, these were Hannah, Kren, and Noah. Pierce was not included in this list. As the Chamber of Commerce's sole shareholder and future vice president, he retained his 10% stake and had full shareholder rights and obligations. This was a fair distribution plan. His companions would grow, and the Chamber of Commerce would expand, with profits only increasing, only declining under extremely unexpected circumstances. The fourth step was to establish a branch chamber. Following the establishment of the main chamber, Lorraine would simultaneously establish its first branch, the Northwest European branch. The main chamber would hold 70% of the branch's equity, with the remaining 30% divided equally between Ramos, Eddie, and Carmen, with 10% each. They would serve as shareholders, executives, and managers of the branch. Carmen would oversee Western and Southern European affairs, Eddie would handle Northern and Central European affairs, and Ramos would handle matters related to the British Isles, Ireland, and Iceland. Their primary task at this stage was to obtain trade licenses from all countries in these regions. The three outstanding young men gladly accepted Lorraine's invitation, and the establishment of the Chamber of Commerce was thus finalized. Having completed these preliminary preparations, Lorraine immediately announced that the Drake caravan fleet would be resting and recuperating. The Atis Beauty, carrying Lorraine and the Crone single-handedly, sailed for Plymouth, arriving at Pier 13 of Soto Harbor once again after 2 years. In the setting sun, the docks, the piers, the bustling port, the stream of people, the occasional small fishing boat gliding across the sea, and, far above the horizon, the massive and majestic Royal Navy warships. Everything here seemed frozen in time, 2 years ago. Nothing had changed, and the people's faces showed little sign of worry about war. They possessed a powerful channel fleet, and war was still far off, far from a time for anxiety. Standing at the bow, Lorraine glanced at the familiar docks, then at the merchant sailors busy on the deck of the Beauty. A wave of emotion washed over him. Kren, accustomed to seeing Lorraine's rare calm, was filled with curiosity. "Captain, you are from Plymouth, right?" "Yes," Lorraine smiled and shook her head. "I know what you want to ask, but it's not that I'm homesick. No, 2 years ago, I was expelled from my family. I spent all my money and exchanged it for a carriage ticket from Tavistock to Port Soto, and came here, a 16-year-old boy, dressed in rags, eating black bread, and that bread was bought by selling his father's relics." Kren blinked in disbelief. "You started your voyage like this?" "Yes," Lorraine smiled coldly. "No one was willing to take me in, and Pierce's father wanted to go to sea, and no one trusted him. So I boarded the Atis Beauty. There was not even a sailor on the ship at that time, and I was the only crew member, Pierce's father." Lake, Lorraine recalled Lake's honest fat face, and his appearance was a little blurry. "I am an incompetent sailor. I lost my captain on my first voyage. I heard that he died of illness during the voyage." Lorraine seemed not to hear what Karen said, but just muttered to himself in a low voice, "That day, Hannah and I made a big fuss in Cherbourg, killed a lot of people, and set a fire. Then we left France and picked up Pierce. Then, I kidnapped you in Elgin." Karen suddenly realized, "Pierce told me that Lake died of a high fever during the voyage. I thought it was strange at the time. It was just a voyage across the channel. With your ability, you would die." "He died of a high fever." Lorraine turned around and patted Karen's arm gently. "Don't be smart, he just died of a high fever." "I understand, go if you understand, and let the sailors take good care of our Beauty. This trip is a bit complicated, and we may have to stay a few more days." P.S. Before 1974, Plymouth was a municipality in Devonshire. It had great political autonomy for most of its history and was not under the jurisdiction of the Devonshire County Council. PS2. In the mid-17th century, the British Navy began reforming its artillery, replacing matchlock cannons with a simpler, lighter flintlock cannon. This contributed to the British Navy's dominance during the late sailing era. Other navies lagged behind in this artillery reform, and the armament of merchant ships lagged even further behind. Therefore, in the 18th century, these two types of naval cannons continued to coexist. Here's a rough outline. Chapter 42 Flags. Plymouth's Town Hall, a small, light brown building with a classical charm, dates back to 1439. It was the first building laid after Plymouth was founded and named. This building has witnessed Plymouth's glorious history, including Francis Drake's 2 circumnavigations in 1557 and 1580, the Royal Navy's victory over the Spanish Armada in 1588, the Mayflower's voyage to the New World in 1620, and the Puritan Revolution from 1640, which transformed English history and temporarily overthrew the monarchy. The Department of Commerce, responsible for registering and establishing chambers of commerce, is located on the east side of the building's 3rd floor, facing the Red Lighthouse of Devonport. Deputy Director Victor Wesley received Lorraine. On his desk sat an atlas displaying 2 flags, one black and one white. The white flag is the Chamber of Commerce flag, with the English cross of St. George as the background, a delicate pansy painted in the center. It is purple in color, with a bright yellow center circle and a snow-white core. The black flag is the pirate flag, with a plain black background and a pure white skull in the center. The skull's eye sockets are burning with different colored flames. The left eye is purple, the right eye is yellow, and the X-shaped cross represents the harpoon and oar. Mr. Wesley was rummaging through the letters of introduction on the table. Roy Chamber of Commerce, Stika Chamber of Commerce, Elming Chamber of Commerce. Mr. Drake does have a wide range of friends in the business community, but the law does not force national monopoly, right? Lorraine nodded slightly. It's not easy for small business groups to make a living. They basically sell whatever they can get. Thank you for Mr. Wesley's understanding, gentleman's recommendation. Viscount Rod Share, Chief Executive of Mowbray County, K.S. Lattice, and Mowbray County Councillor Carl Piddock, he frowned. M.R. Drake is Scottish, I'm English, and a native of Devon, a Devon gentleman who can be recognized by the Scots. Mr. Wesley's expression became much more friendly. Devon is proud of you. Thank you for your compliment. You have the basic conditions to establish a Chamber of Commerce. I believe a deposit of £1,000 will not be difficult for you. Mr. Wesley gathered all the letters together, revealing the flag picture in the album, with an embarrassed look on his face. M.R. Drake, you go ahead, you're one of us, so I'll just be blunt. He took a breath. Do you have any misunderstandings about the Chamber of Commerce? You know, we're merchants, not pirates. Lorraine lifted his suitcase, took out his letter of marque, and laid it flat in front of Mr. Wesley. Sir, I'm not registering a regular Chamber of Commerce, I'm registering a privateering chamber. Privateering? This is... Mr. Wesley's eyes widened. You're Drake from the Drake family. As an outcast, I'm not proud of my family. Lorraine tapped lightly on the glass of the letter of marque. Sir, I'm only proud of my great ancestors. The Drake Chamber of Commerce was officially established. Mr. Wesley quickly processed originals and copies of the Chamber of Commerce license, ship and artillery trading permits, and the Kingdom of England trade permit for Lorraine, noting the Chamber's information, flag, and letter of marque. This meant that from that day forward, the Drake letter of marque no longer represented Lorraine alone, but rather extended its authority to the entire Drake Chamber of Commerce fleet. Lorraine modestly thanked Mr. Wesley and, accompanied by him, left the town hall. Unable to contain his urge, he drove in a carriage straight to Sail Harbor, Plymouth's largest civilian port. At Sail Harbor's ship exchange, he met up with Crone, who had arrived earlier, and immediately asked, I hope you've chosen a new flagship for the Chamber of Commerce in this day and a half. In fact, I may have done better than I expected. The large Crone rubbed his nose, a look of shyness. He led Lorraine into the exchange's reception room and handed him 2 sets of ship deeds. These were 2 brigantine-type frigates, one 12 years old and the other 15 years old. Both were constructed from Canadian fir, a material renowned for its excellent quality and affordability in civilian vessels. They had originally been the property of a colonial Chamber of Commerce. Due to the impact of the Revolutionary War, the chamber ran into financial difficulties, prompting the original owner to reluctantly sell the ships. Crone had already inspected the actual ships at the dock. Despite their age, they were well maintained and in excellent working order. With minimal repairs, they were more than capable of handling any situation at sea. They were being sold as a package, and the price, £3,700. This price was shockingly low, and Lorraine was puzzled by his luck. When the order came in, Crone calmly paid the trader £4,000. Only after the ship's deeds were officially transferred to the Chamber of Commerce did he whisper to Lorraine, every trader has some unique inventory that never appears on the trading board in the hall. I learned this when I was an apprentice at Devonport. Lorraine suddenly understood. The 2 brigantine ships were officially delivered, the younger one named the Butterfly Flower and the older one the Clover. The Chamber of Commerce had £6,800 remaining in its operating funds, and Lorraine, without blinking, immediately equipped the Butterfly Flower with 20 guns, according to the standard configuration, at a total cost of £5,300. The remaining funds, however, could not be moved. The Clover sailed empty north, gathering all the 6-pounder cannons in Elgin for temporary firepower. After a full week of preparation, the 2 majestic ships, the Britannian and the Atis Bell, hoisting brand-new pansy flags, sailed along the winding coastline of Britain back to Elgin. At the Drake Trading House, the first general meeting of shareholders since the establishment of the Chamber of Commerce was held. Hina, Kren, Noah, Pierce, Ramos, Eddie, and Carmen, They were all shareholders of the new Chamber of Commerce, and each was dressed in their finest attire. My dear friends, the Drake Chamber of Commerce and the Northern European branch are now established. The applause was thunderous. These young men, the oldest, Eddie, 29, the youngest, Pierce, 10, now own their own real businesses, leaving behind the black marketeers to become true maritime merchants of this era. Lorraine raised his glass to them, the azure cocktail as deep as the ocean, swaying gently in the tall glass like waves. Our Chamber of Commerce is still very weak. We have 1,500 British pounds in cash, 2 brigantine ships, 4 Kirks, and less than 4,000 British pounds in inventory. These things symbolize wealth in Elgin, but in the world of merchants, they're nothing, but we're young. Lorraine suddenly laughed. Young people, having dreams is enough. Why do we need money? Everyone laughed and raised their glasses. Kren's voice was particularly loud among the crowd. He shouted, "Salute to our poor youth, salute to our great dreams, salute to our admiral, cheers." Chapter 41 Butterfly Flower. This is our new flagship. The next day, the crew, led by Lorraine, boarded the newly renovated Iris. At the previous day's dinner, Lorraine had officially announced the Chamber of Commerce's first phase of plans and conducted a fleet-wide reorganization of the existing vessels. The flagship was officially transferred to the Iris. A brigantine-style ketch with standard firepower, the Iris was 30 meters long, 8 meters wide, and 2 masts. Its foremast was 20 meters square-rigged, while its mainmast was 22 meters long and fore-aft, with 4 triangular bowsprits and 2 catching sails between the masts. Its massive, comprehensive rig and slender, pointed-bottom hull made it a high-speed ship, capable of reaching 12 knots with a tailwind and maintaining 4 to 5 knots even with a headwind. It had 5 decks, 2 inner decks, 1 main deck, and 2 upper decks. The lower deck was a watertight compartment, mostly below the waterline, often used for supplies and cargo. The middle gun deck was armed with 10 9-pound long-range guns, 5 on each side. The upper main deck was equipped with 8 6-pound long-range cannons, normally stowed in the forecastle and only brought aloft in times of war. The forecastle consisted of 2 decks. The upper deck served as a gun bay, where Lorraine had relocated a Scott crossbow. After all, this antique weapon had become Lorraine's trademark, and he wasn't used to it even for a day. The lower deck, built on the gun deck, served as a chicken coop and sheep pen. While offshore shipping didn't require live poultry, Lorraine wouldn't stay offshore permanently, and Hannah loved small animals. The aft deck consisted of 3 decks. The lowest deck, also located on the gun deck, was the aft gun bay, equipped with 2 6-pound short-range cannons. Kren and Ramos's sleeping quarters, as well as the shipwright's workshop, were also located on this level. The middle deck housed the dining room, the kitchen, and the sleeping quarters of Pierce and Noah. There were also 2 empty cabins, temporarily used as a food storage and a divination room. Noah's tarot readings were very popular among the sailors. With priests reluctant to board Lorraine's ship, they subtly replaced the confessional and became a source of spiritual comfort for the sailors. The upper deck was undoubtedly home to Lorraine and Hannah's cabins. This was the center of authority on the ship, with a steering wheel perched above them on the upper deck. The crew's duties had also undergone subtle adjustments. Lorraine was naturally the captain, Hannah served as first mate and helmsman, Kren was third mate, bosun, and sailmaster, and Noah remained merely a fortune-teller. Pierce had grown a bit older, his natural eye for the ship becoming increasingly apparent. He now served as lookout, in addition to his duties as trainee second mate and chef. Ramos was aboard for the first time as a sailor. Before retiring, he had been a gunner on HMS Conqueror. His new role aboard the Papillon was due to the need for a professional gunner to man the guns and help Lorraine relieve him of the pressure. Lorraine had divided the Chamber of Commerce's ships into 2 fleets. The first fleet, with a flagship, the Iris, comprised the Atis Beauty and the Beverly Merchant, primarily operating routes from Britain to the Iberian Peninsula. Lorraine assumed the role of admiral, while Ramos was appointed vice admiral. The second fleet, with a flagship, the Clover, comprised the Carville Drunkard and the Northern Knight, primarily operating the relatively easy route from Britain to Scandinavia. Admiral Eddie was in command of both fleets. Both fleets would continue to rely on the 3 black ports, gradually shifting their focus to the 4 major ports of Edinburgh, Southampton, Stavanger, and Bilbao, based on stable profits. On May 1, 1778, at Elgin, Scotland, The newly renovated Drake merchants chose the first day of the month to sail, as this day, unlike any other in the distant east, symbolized a new beginning. The sky was overcast, but the wind and waves were calm. The Iris, with its anchors furled, was pushed by the shore waves as it slowly retreated into the open sea. Noah knelt at the bow, spreading out her silver tarot behind Lorraine. "Pick a card, my captain. Today is May 1st. I choose the 5th card from the left." Noah gently pulled out the card, turned it over, and laid it flat on the deck. Number I, the upright magician. Mercury has bright eyes and a confident smile, symbolizing a new beginning and a change of form. You have great power and skilled techniques, which will help you and you will realize your ambitions. Lorraine smiled and bowed, without a blatant blessing. "My fortune teller lady, everything is the choice of fate, Captain. Thank you." Pierce tore off his headscarf on the lookout tower. "The wind direction is southwest, 4 knots, a moderate stroke." Kren laughed and shouted to the sailors at the top of his voice, "Half sail, gentlemen. Run on the deck." The sails of the butterfly flower slowly rose, and Hannah turned the handwheel. The slender ship drew an arc and turned across the bow, forming a V-shape with the Atis Beauty and the Beverly Merchant. Lorraine's boots touched the bow railing, and with a clang he drew his sword, raised the guild's flag. Target Bermeo, Drake's guild's first fleet, set sail. Over 3 months had passed in a flash. Westerdock was Southampton's largest port, and Herbert Walker Street was the main thoroughfare of the Westerdock Harbour area. 79 Herbert Walker Street was a 3-story, red brick building, facing the street, without a courtyard. This was the Drake's Guild's new headquarters, officially separate from the harbor's trading office. It primarily handled administrative matters for the guild and provided a landside retreat for Lorraine and his crew. The guild's development was smooth sailing. After being equipped with a powerful brigantine, the 1st and 2nd fleets had never again encountered pirate attacks. Fully equipped, with its sailors' increasingly skilled gunnery, the Pansy was undoubtedly a formidable force near the coast. While the Clover's strength was 2 or 3 levels lower, pirates wouldn't readily provoke it in the far more tranquil North Sea route than the Cantabrian Sea. Stability is the best friend of the Chamber of Commerce. Over the past 3 months, the Drake Chamber of Commerce has grown rapidly, securing trade licenses with Spain, Wales, and Denmark, extending its reach into the Baltic Sea while formally shifting its focus from its original 3 dark ports to the bustling major ports. These 7 ports comprise Stavanger, Norway, Copenhagen, Denmark, Edinburgh, Scotland, Cardiff, Wales, Southampton, England, Bilbao, Basque Country, and Gijón, Spain. Together, these 7 major ports form an upgraded Northwest European triangle trade chain, generating steadily rising profits each month, with Southampton at its core. This is why Lorraine established the Chamber of Commerce's headquarters in this southern England port city, known for its vibrant commercial atmosphere. This voyage was scheduled for Lorraine and Noah's shifts. Carefree Noah had already planned a short trip to Arminsk, intending to use his dividend to buy a comfortable hand-woven carpet for his new divination room. Lorraine wasn't so lucky. Besides being a seaman, he was also the president of the Chamber of Commerce. He couldn't rest until the Chamber of Commerce was truly on track. Sipping a fragrant Colombian coffee, Lorraine rubbed his brow and spread out the Chamber of Commerce's accounts. The development was promising. The markets in Denmark, Wales, England, and Spain didn't require profit sharing with partners, and the tax rates at legitimate ports were much lower than those at illegal ports. These combined advantages led to rapid profit growth. For the entire month of July, after deducting all expenses and dividends, the Chamber of Commerce's profits officially reached the £2,000 mark. Lorraine took 60%, earning £1,200 for himself, Pierce £200, and the 4 seamen shared £600 equally. For that month alone, each person earned £150. He now had £4,270 in cash, and the cargo in his warehouse and on board was worth nearly £6,000. By November, he could have the Clover fully equipped with a tight budget. But was it even necessary? For the Drake merchants, the situation in the North Sea was relatively stable. They had a good relationship with the powerful Vikings, and the Clover, armed with 6-pounder guns, was a sufficient deterrent there, so a hasty upgrade seemed unnecessary. The money could be better spent, such as adding 2 affordable Ketch-class schooners to the British Isles coastal transit fleet, improving the efficiency of both fleets. Or perhaps upgrading them to the larger and faster schooner class, instead of the Ketch. Since navigating the British coastline hardly required guns, 2 schooners would cost only £2,400. Form a transshipment fleet, recruit a steadfast and steady admiral, and take advantage of the opportunity to open up the Irish market. After all, Dublin has always been a coveted port. The more I think about it, the more I feel that this development direction is not bad. Lorraine hesitated whether to go to Plymouth immediately to settle the matter. Miss Hannah, who was promoted to the secretary of the General Association, suddenly knocked on the door. Lorraine frowned. Miss Hannah, is there something wrong? An urgent letter from Bilbao, Mr. President. Hannah blushed and gently placed a wax-sealed mailbox on Lorraine's desk. She took a breath and said, Miss Xavier said that she hopes you will read the letter as soon as possible and make a decision as soon as possible. Recommendations will start tomorrow afternoon, and the first new book will be recommended. I'm so nervous. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 42 Hunting Ground. The news that had Carmen so urgently concerned her could only be bad. At a high-class ball in Bilbao, she had uncovered startling intelligence. The French José and Cama Chambers, the Dutch Jodl Chambers, and the Spanish Herrera Chambers had formally signed an alliance agreement. They planned to establish hunting grounds in the Cantabrian Sea, targeting British merchants and completely expelling the kingdom's enemies from the French-Spanish coast. Given the gravity of the matter, Carmen did not immediately inform Lorraine, instead spending over a month verifying the information. The results were not encouraging. The intelligence was true. These 4 chambers were established offshore privateers, each with over 20 merchant ships, each a formidable force for the current Drake Chamber. They had formed an alliance and held numerous secret meetings in France. The Drake Chamber was unfamiliar with the area, and despite all her efforts, Carmen remained completely unaware of crucial details such as the hunt start time, duration, and the size of the participating fleets. The enemy is in the dark, we are in the light. The enemy is strong, we are weak. The enemy is numerous, we are few. Looking at this urgent letter, Lorraine fell into deep thought. He asked himself, could Spain be abandoned? No. Spain was the only country in Europe with vast and established overseas colonies, yet, due to its economic depression, it lacked a sufficient domestic market. It was the Chamber of Commerce's core source of cheap New World and Asian and African goods, and the associated profits accounted for 70% of the Chamber's total. Not wanting to fall into mediocrity, Lorraine had no reason to abandon it. So could the Cantabrian route be abandoned? The answer, again, it seemed. The Cantabrian route was Britain's only continental sea route to Spain. Without it, Lorraine's only option was the Celtic Sea. While the Celtic Sea bordered the Cantabrian Sea, the two had completely different hydrological environments. It was already part of the Atlantic Ocean. The waters were deep, the waves were high, and it reached all the way to Cape Bars, northwest of the Iberian Peninsula. If Lorraine chose this deep-water route, he would have to make a huge detour every time he went to Bilbao, significantly impacting the Chamber of Commerce's logistics efficiency. Moreover, this wasn't the only price the Chamber of Commerce would have to pay. The wide-bottomed cogs weren't suited to deep-water environments. In such hydrological conditions, the ships were at constant risk of capsizing. The only option was to abandon the cogs. But if they were to abandon them all at once, the Chamber of Commerce wouldn't be able to muster the necessary shipping capacity to maintain its profit growth. The Clover could not leave the Second Fleet. The North Sea's tranquility was due to the Clover's deterrent. If she were to be rashly deployed, Lorraine wouldn't necessarily be able to secure the Spanish route, and would only lose the stable but less productive North Sea route. What should he do? He pondered all night, and only when the sun rose the next day did he finally write his reply. Miss Carmen Xavier, I have received your letter. Please continue to inquire. I will remain at sea, observing the situation. Your friend, Lorraine Arthur Drake. The Chamber of Commerce declared a state of war. Lorraine immediately cancelled all rest shifts for all seamen and sailors. He went to Plymouth and, spending £2,800, purchased 8 9-pound cannons to replace the 6-pound medium guns on the Clover. These were used to arm the Atis Bell and the Beverly Merchant. He also increased the crew of the Butterfly from its base crew of 20 to 120, ensuring full utilization of its formidable firepower. The first fleet adopted a posture of rushing to transport goods. The Spanish branch was working tirelessly to gather goods, and the 3 ships were plying the Cantabrian route at an average of once a week. This surprisingly led to a sharp increase in profits for August, far exceeding previous expectations. It was, after all, a pleasant surprise. In the 3rd week, the first fleet departed Georgian and sailed 120 kilometers west of Belle Isle, France, when Pierce finally detected the smoke of battle. "Brother! A naval battle is underway at 2 o'clock, 10 kilometers away," Lorraine leaped from the deck. "Transfer the flagship's cargo to the subordinate ship, the Papillion. Lighten your gear and advance. 10 kilometers equals approximately 5.5 nautical miles." With a moderately strong headwind, the Papillion abandoned 2 fully loaded Cock-class ships and, in just over an hour, quietly approached the battlefield from leeward. The thick smoke drifting across the sea provided Lorraine with ample cover. Neither side noticed a Papillion. Lorraine stood on the foremast's secondary observation post, telescope raised high, observing the battlefield. The battle was approximately 2 kilometers away, very close. Even with a headwind, the Papillion was confident it could reach an attacking position within 15 minutes. Lorraine observed a total of 9 ships. The attacked party flew the flag of the British Chamber of Commerce, featuring a unicorn. They had 4 ships, 2 Cock-class ships were slowly sinking in flames, and 2 mixed-rigged schooners were struggling to escape southward. However, Lorraine saw no chance of success. The attackers were far more powerful. Their flagship, a brigantine gunboat of the same class as the Apache, was in pursuit, its guns fully opened. Of their 4 composite schooners, only one had temporarily dropped anchor due to fire. The other 3 arced across the sea, preparing to pass the British ship and form a double team. Lorraine leaped down the cable, and the crew gathered around. "Pierce, I need you to return to port and keep us informed of the enemy flagship's position. Henna, sail west to the windward side, cut in from the enemy's bow, and seize the T-end. They're in the thick of the battle and don't have lookouts, so you'll just need to keep your range at the current 2 kilometers. Ramos, get your gunners ready, we're going to fire from both sides. Kren, set sail, top speed. Noah, let the sailors know that fate has chosen us." He walked to the bow, looked at the crew, and with a whoosh, peeled back the oilcloth covering the harpoon guns. "I see a great opportunity," he said. "The guild's flag is flying. Pansy, join the fight." Following Lorraine's command, Pansy hoisted its massive sails. With a bowsprit, tarpaulin, and mainsail simultaneously furled to their maximum, the slender ship carved a vast arc across the calm sea, traversing the wind belt, heading from a crosswind to a downwind course. The deck was bustling with activity. 6-pound cannons were rolled out of the bow cabin and positioned evenly spaced to either side. The gun ports on both sides of the gun deck fully opened. Ammunition was loaded, ignited, and the black barrels jutted out of the portholes. At the rear of the ship, 5 sailors manned each gun, each one focused and ready to fight. Pierce reported the enemy flagship's position one last time. Lorraine instructed him to secure himself, then took a deep breath and settled into his harpoon firing position. Lorraine shouted, 15 degrees left rudder. Full sail. Tackle, 15 degrees left rudder. Full sail. Tackle, full sail. Tackle, tackle. P.S. During the muzzle-loading cannon operation, each gun required 5 to 10 people to operate due to the complicated operation, which is also the main reason why warships need to carry a large number of sailors. Chapter 43 T-Strike. In the Cantabrian Sea, off the coast west of Belle Isle, France, the battle raged. The mixed-rigged schooner, with its double fore-aft sail, held its own against high-speed vessels in shallow waters despite its broad-bottomed design. But that wasn't enough to explain Raven's escape. Facing the enemy's overwhelming firepower, his fleet was forced to resort to wave-like maneuvering, which significantly slowed them. By now, the 2 flanking enemy ships of the same type had already circled ahead of him. If the enemy closed the door, Raven's only options would be death or surrender. Raven was the admiral of the 2nd Fleet of the Southampton Mindle Merchants Guild. Thanks to the guild master's personality, the Mindle Merchants Guild was a stable but far from formidable guild. The destruction of the 2nd Fleet would severely damage the guild. Even though the guild master was the Viscount's brother, he would lose the Viscount's trust completely after this defeat. Thinking of the guild master's years of nurturing and cultivation, Raven's eyes welled up. He couldn't let this happen, even if there was only a slight chance, even if. Admiral. Look behind you, Raven, who was about to fight to the death, shuddered suddenly, and subconsciously followed the first mate's instructions, looking at the pursuers behind him. He screamed in shock, "Oh my god!" At the end of Hakesea, a towering mast jumped out of the sea like a knight's lance, and an unfamiliar flag fluttered on the masthead. Purple flowers, yellow and white stripes, a pure white background printed with a bright Guardian of St. George. "It's our fellow countrymen in England," Raven was ecstatic. The rescue ship completely came into view, moving at a speed like the wind, with the front facing horizontally and the rear facing vertically. All the sails were inflated to the maximum in the direction of the wind, and the slender ship rushed forward into the center of the battlefield. "It's the brigantine," Raven choked with sobs, his voice hoarse as he shouted, "Boys, our reinforcements are here. Show those arrogant Frenchmen the courage of us English seamen. Charge, ride 5 degrees starboard, charge." Lorraine shouted the same command. He sat at the bow, hands on the harpoon gun handle, using the final moment to fine-tune the Papillion's approach to the battlefield. The battlefield before him was clearly divided, from south to north. At the front were the 2 pirate schooners, in the middle was the English Unicorn, and at the rear were another pirate schooner and her flagship, the brigantine. There was a gap of about 50 meters between the 2 ships, and it was this mere 50-meter gap that Lorraine aimed for. "Seize the T-head. Cross the battle. Prepare to reef the sails. Both sides, prepare to fire." The sailor manning the guns raised their torches, and the sailors holding the ropes tightly. They were about to enter the battlefield, but aside from Lorraine and Pierce, high up on the watchtower, no one paid any attention to the frantic enemy ship so close. They were preoccupied with their own tasks. Every Englishman knew that only by concentrating on their duties on the battlefield would victory lift its skirts in England's favor. 50 meters. "Prepare to charge," Lorraine roared, and Pren and Ramos both raised their arms. "Fire, lower the sails," 2 orders came simultaneously. In an instant, all the sails were lowered, and the Pansy lost its wind. The slender and upright ship came to a sudden stop, smack dab in the middle of the 2 enemy warships, forming a cross, its black muzzles pointed bow and stern. Boom, 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 boom. All 18 guns opened fire in succession. The upper 6-pounders were loaded with buckshot, and the fine pellets ripped across the deck, throwing men and horses to the ground. The lower 9-pounders were loaded with solid shot, and the fiery iron balls pounded against the hull, sending wood chips flying. More shells landed on the sea, exploding with massive spray that shot skyward, sending surging waves rocking the 3 warships. The 2 enemy ships immediately lowered their mainsails upon being attacked. They began maneuvering their bows, desperately trying to turn their ships, exposing their powerful broadsides to the Butterfly. Lorraine remained unfazed. Seizing the opportunity to see the enemy's decks littered with corpses, he swiftly unleashed his harpoon, its line attached, and with a thud, it pierced the pirate flagship's mainmast. He then left his firing position. He drew his longsword from his waist. "Suppress schooner with fire, sailors boarding the brigantine." Cron Scott, acting captain. "Hannah, Noah, we're on board." A second barrage of artillery fire erupted, the flames gleaming only on the starboard side of the Butterfly. Sailors on deck cast their grappling lines toward the nearby brigantine. Lorraine, Hannah, and Noah were the first to step aboard, treading on the thick harpoon lines like they were walking on a tightrope. Whack, whiz, whiz. Lorraine rushed the fastest, but the first to exert force was always Hannah, who followed behind him. The red velvet flying knife whizzed past Lorraine's side, knocking down 3 pirates who wanted to cut the rope in a split second, and each knife hit the side of the neck accurately. The pirates fell, and Lorraine and Hannah stepped onto the blood-stained deck one after another. They did not stop, and separated to the left and right as they landed. Lorraine killed the pirates who swarmed over, and his pair of long swords danced like a stream of light. Hannah pursed her lips and rushed to the gun position. The guns were ready, and they only had to wait for the ship to swing sideways to ignite the rope and fire the shells at the deck of the Butterfly Flower. And Noah followed closely behind them. The shy witch is not as harmless as she looks, and her way of fighting is with cards. The minor arcana of the silver tarot was her weapon. She tore 56 white and thin silver pieces into a chain in her hands. From time to time, a piece flew out, piercing the pirates' chests like a flying knife, opening a path for Lorraine and Hannah, clearing the front line. The 3 of them set off a bloody storm on the pirates' deck that was no less than artillery fire, and even more lethal. The battle on the Butterfly Flower was no less intense than her captain's. On the port side, 7 or 8 brave sailors pulled the grappling hooks to pull the 2 ships closer, and swung out at a distance of 5 or 6 meters, biding their lives, and swung towards the enemy side like Tarzan. The boarding planks were set up. 20 or so people raised their scimitars and, under Kren's command, shouted and rushed onto the enemy ship. They rushed past Lorraine and the other 2 who had been fighting fiercely for several minutes, and engaged in a battle with the pirates. On the starboard side, Ramos directed all 9 guns, 4 above and 5 below, unleashing a barrage of fire at a rate of nearly 1 round every 3 minutes on the opposing schooner, which had already completed its maneuvering. Only 20 meters separated the 2 sides, 9 against 4, and sawdust and white smoke formed a haze between the 2. The brigantine was a true gunboat. Its brig class, the same class, was ranked 6th in navies. Its hull strength, gun density, side height, and hull thickness were unmatched by the schooner. The artillery exchange between the 2 sides was a display of absolute dominance. In less than 15 minutes, after 5 rounds of bombardment, Ramos had silenced 3 of the enemy's gun positions. The remaining 6-pounder, split into chain shells, shattered the enemy's foremast with a single round, completely denying the enemy the opportunity to escape the battlefield. Victory began to tilt towards the Pansy. Puff. Lorraine ducked, diverting the enemy's advance with his left blade, and then slashed with his right blade, slicing through his chest. A fountain of blood sprayed into the air, splattering Lorraine all over. 10, he muttered softly, straightening up and slowly ascending the poop steps. 2 more pirates lunged at him, 1 on each side. Lorraine was about to draw his sword when a flash of red and a silver light flashed simultaneously from left and right. The red pierced the target's forehead, the silver pierced the opponent's chest. The 2 unfortunate pirates instantly tumbled from the railing. Lorraine, knife in hand, turned back, a mixture of laughter and tears. He first saw the one-sided battle on deck. Drake's brave sailors had already stormed down the central staircase to the lower gun deck. He then saw Henna and Noah standing tall behind him, one playing with a knife, the other with cards. Their bodies were unblemished, a stark contrast to his blood-soaked, barbaric appearance. "Are you guys free? Go help the gun deck." Henna, with a cat-like gait, pulled the knife from the dead man's forehead, wiped it, and sheathed it. They counterattacked, trying to retake the deck, but were defeated. Noah nodded quickly, blushing. "This means that the sailors are not storming the gun deck, but are hunting down the remaining enemies, so their help is not needed. What else can be said?" Lorraine shrugged and kicked open the hatch in the center of the top floor. The silver tarot and the throwing knife shot in almost at the same time. Dug. Dug. No sound. Lorraine stretched his head to look with a strange expression, only to see a white young man with a blue face wearing an admiral's uniform. The young man pulled out a red velvet throwing knife that was stuck in his ear with lingering fear. "I am Adorned Descendants, the nephew of Viscount Descendants of Bordeaux." He held the throwing knife and swallowed. "I demand treatment and rights that match my status, and at the same time respect your right to freely distribute all my personal belongings. I am your prisoner now. You can ask my family for a ransom. I promise that the price will satisfy you." Chapter 44, Sailor's Mirror Image. The setting sun shone across the sea, where the battle had just ended. The sea lay in shambles, littered with broken wood, corpses, scattered cargo, and shrouded in smoke from ships. The battle had concluded. After 3 hours of fierce fighting, the English had emerged victorious. Lorraine boarded and captured the enemy flagship, the Far Light, and forced the schooner Mermaid Song, which had lost its mainmast, to land. Raven, reinforced by a powerful force, joined forces with 2 ships in a bloody battle against the enemy. At the cost of heavy losses to their frigate, they captured the Gold Coast, while the other schooner fled. Faced with this outcome, the pure white sands, already incapacitated from extinguishing a fire, wisely surrendered. Lorraine rendezvoused with his 2 cooks and, while the crews were busy cleaning up the battlefield, greeted Raven on the deck of the Butterfly. "Dear sir, I am Raven Shawner, Admiral of the 2nd Fleet of the Southampton Mindle Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for your generous assistance. I have sincere admiration for the courage and strength of you and your men, Mr. Shawner. I am Lorraine Drake, President of the Plymouth Drake Chamber of Commerce. Our chamber's headquarters is also in Southampton. What a coincidence, it was a brilliant battle, a near-complete victory. Lorraine and his Propylian completely dominated the battlefield and naturally had the final say in the distribution of post-war benefits. Raven had no doubts about this. The battle yielded a rich harvest, 1 brigantine-class ship, the Far-Sighted, minor damage, 3 mixed-sail Snake-class ships, the Mermaid Song, heavily damaged, the Gold Coast, moderately damaged, and the Pure White Sands, moderately damaged. Lorraine also seized Atron's sword, pistol, atlas, and a worthless logbook, plundering nearly £1,000 worth of property and nearly £3,000 worth of cargo. The total value of the cargo far exceeded £10,000. Lorraine could have kept everything for himself, or even, out of moral obligation, have handed over only the Gold Coast, captured independently by the Mindel Chamber of Commerce. Either way, it wouldn't have violated the rules of the game at sea. But after careful consideration, he gave the less damaged Gold Coast and the pristine white sand beach to Raven. Raven was quite surprised. Mr. Drake, such distribution will be bad for you and your crew. We are all English gentlemen, and close friends in the same port. Although Drake lost 2 people and injured 7, your losses are greater. Raven shook his head rationally. We are prey, and it is our duty to fight, and you could have stayed out of this battle. Impossible. Lorraine smiled faintly. The French, Spanish and Dutch have set up hunting grounds in this sea area. We need friends, not to act on our own and survive on our own. Hunting ground. This is important information obtained by Miss Xavier, the manager of our Bilbao. Lorraine took out a roll of parchment and handed it to Raven. This matter should no longer be a secret. Even for my own sake, I don't want an upright gentleman who can be a comrade in arms to be eliminated early. Lorraine looked at Raven solemnly. Mr. Shawgina, please accept Drake's kindness. The distribution of ships ends here, and personal belongings and goods do not need to be distributed to the Mindel Chamber of Commerce. Lorraine generously distributed all his wealth to the 120 sailors who participated in the battle. The Chamber of Commerce provided an additional £50 in subsidies to the wounded, and the pensions for those killed in action reached £200. Such a huge reward soared the morale of the ship, almost reaching the heavens. The rest were Atron's personal belongings. Lorraine gave the logbook to Pierce to observe and study. He could ask Atron for the code or try to decipher it himself. Lorraine gave Ramos his sword, a French naval officer's sword, not only well made but also of great significance. Atron's pistol put Lorraine in a dilemma. It was a good gun, not only heavy but also accurate, with an effective range of 10 meters, making it a powerful weapon for self-defense. But it was not a weapon. The gold-wrapped barrel and ivory-decorated stock were inlaid with gems and exquisitely carved, making it a luxurious work of art. This gun should have been perfect for little Pierce's self-defense, but due to its excessive bulk, it was too heavy for a child, even a strong one. What a superfluous aesthetic. Lorraine pursed his lips as he slid the gun onto his waist, formally claiming ownership of the firearm. And finally, the atlas. It was a treasure, bound in black Morocco leather, with thick, clear, hand-painted folios, exquisitely colored, and adorned with the gold and silver lace and ornamentation. The atlas contained 44 charts, covering the Baltic Sea, the North Sea, the British Isles and Ireland, the Strait of Dover, the Cantabrian Sea, and the Celtic Sea, encompassing all the maritime regions of northwestern Europe. Overlays of transparent overlays were applied to the charts, creating a clear, layered image based on contemporary discoveries without damaging the original artwork. Lorraine saw Lucas Janssen Wagenar's signature at the end of each chart, and the name of the atlas was Sailor's Mirror Image. The Netherlands is a global benchmark for cartography, having produced a steady stream of exceptional cartographers since the 15th century. Mr. Wagenaar was the undisputed leader and true leader among this galaxy of Dutch cartographers. In 1584, he published A Mariner's Mirror, a collection of 44 maps of the waters of northern Europe, primarily showing coastlines, landmarks, the outline of the coast as seen from a seaside position, and water depths. Wagenaar's atlases were so popular that the English adopted the term Wagenaar, a variation of his name, to refer specifically to any atlas depicting the coast. This was a masterpiece, hand-drawn by Mr. Wagenaar. Lorraine was overjoyed and astounded by the wealth of the Dessay Chamber of Commerce. Mr. Wagenaar had been dead for many years, and regardless of its practical value, a well-preserved atlas like this would be worth a fully equipped brigantine if it were put up for auction, or £10,000. Crazy. The biggest gain of this battle was actually in Atron's cabin. After calming down his excitement, Lorraine returned to the deck with the atlas. The cleanup of the battlefield was nearing completion. The dead sailors were thrown into the sea, and the living, whether injured or not, were now gathered in the small boat. According to the rules of the sea, they would be exiled, and the winner only needed to provide them with food and water that was barely enough for 2 days to be considered as fulfilling their moral obligation, and Lorraine gave them 3 days. The Far Light, which had basically no major damage, was assigned sailors. And the badly damaged Mermaid Song also pulled up the towline, and now it was floating behind the Far Light, rising and falling quietly. Lorraine watched the sailors rowing the boat towards the French coastline, took over the red and white double flag, and signaled to Raven, "Set sail, friend." Raven responded with a precise flag signal. "What I've been asking for is more like this." Lorraine laughed and raised his arms high. "Butterfly flower, target Southampton, set sail, go home." The first real naval battle. Please vote, please vote. Chapter 45 Destroyer. Hey, Crone, my brother said that the Atlas is worth a brigantine. Is that true? I'm not familiar with the market price of nautical charts, but Wagener is very famous, and the Atlas he drew himself is worth £10,000. It should not be an exaggeration. Oh my god. The fully equipped Far Light, the Atlas of the same value as the Far Light, £3,000 of goods and a £1,200 mixed sail schooner, the money we earn from a battle, isn't it, isn't it? The big crone gave the little Pierce a cold look. Why do you always get rich overnight as a privateer? The profit from looting is never comparable to that of a legitimate business. Then what business is there? Go rob. We are not pirates. Crone slapped little Pierce on the head and couldn't help sighing. Looting money is easy to make, but it's not easy to make, because as long as we lose once, we will have nothing. Southampton, Drake Chamber of Commerce Headquarters. Lorraine is receiving an important guest. His guest was Jero Mindel, the younger brother of the local notable Viscount Mindel, president of the Mindel Chamber of Commerce, and Raven's sailing mentor and guide. Jero was a gentleman in his 40s, with bright gray eyes. Though he appeared meticulous, his smile was remarkably cheerful, more Scottish than English. Lorraine, who had always disliked the English's penchant for rigidity and rigor, hit it off immediately and enjoyed a lively conversation. Brave, skilled in warfare, upright, and generous young man, I see I'm truly old. I didn't realize a young wolf had entered the Southampton sheepfold. Lorraine smiled wryly and raised his teacup. Mr. Mindel, Drake's Chamber of Commerce has only been established 4 months ago, and settled in Southampton only 2 months ago. You haven't heard about it because we're not well known. Don't underestimate yourself, ability has nothing to do with qualifications, Mr. Drake. Jero laughed heartily. The Drake Chamber of Commerce has only just been established. It shouldn't have joined the trade association yet, right? Trade associations are voluntary, private organizations within an industry, often with a president and a board of directors responsible for mediating internal conflicts. Within this framework, members share intelligence and information, providing mutual assistance through intermediaries and headhunters, which is extremely beneficial to a trade association. The problem is that joining a guild requires a recommendation, and generally only from founding members or the board of directors. This inevitably requires the accumulation of connections and reputation. This system can only provide icing on the cake, not timely assistance. Lorraine was very self-aware and hadn't considered the issue before. But from what Jero had said, it seemed he was interested in becoming Lorraine's recommender. A piece of cake? Lorraine was somewhat flattered and sat up straight. Mr. Mindel, you mean, the Offshore Guild is an ordinary small guild, established 37 years ago, with 29 members, most of whom are small and medium-sized chambers of commerce specializing in offshore trade. As one of its executive directors, the Mindel Chamber of Commerce happens to have the right of recommendation, and we hope to introduce outstanding young people to a broader stage. Thank you very much, my sir. Lorraine bowed deeply. Wait for my good news, young man. I'll introduce you to the president and other directors. This process will take about a month. I look forward to it. The naval battle west of Belle Isle had a profound impact on Lorraine. The sinking Kirk class, the burning schooner class, the blood, the corpses, the constant bombardment. He keenly felt that the broad-bottomed merchant ships, with their thin hulls and flimsy decks, were no longer able to withstand the increasingly harsh conditions of the Cantabrian landscape. Coincidentally, he had captured the Far Light, which finally gave him room for maneuver compared to a month earlier. The Chamber of Commerce fleet was restructured. The First Fleet retained the Patrulli as flagship, while the repaired Far Light was renamed Cattail, following the Chamber of Commerce naming conventions, becoming its sole companion ship. Ramos was transferred to Cattail, remaining vice admiral of the fleet. As a result, the First Fleet's overall carrying capacity was reduced by 20%, but its firepower, speed, and responsiveness were no match for its predecessors. This significantly improved its survivability, while limiting the cost of route profits. The Atis Beauty and the Beverly Merchant were transferred to the Second Fleet to increase carrying capacity and attempt to open trade routes with Prussia and Sweden. Lorraine also formally established a British home transport fleet. He purchased a brand new two-masted schooner, named the Siren, and renamed the Mermaid Song the Mermaid, forming a new fleet. The admiral was 62-year-old Captain Carlo Merlin, a Southampton native and experienced seaman recommended by Jarrow. This fleet would be responsible for the transshipment of cargo between Edinburgh, Southampton, and Cardiff, improving the efficiency of the First and Second Fleets while also striving to obtain Irish trading licenses and establish access to the Dublin market. The restructuring of the Chamber of Commerce was nearing completion, and Carmen, who had contacted Porto, had received a response. As Attring had stated, the Dessay Chamber of Commerce was willing to redeem the sailors. However, they objected to Lorraine's proposal to cover the compensation for the wounded and killed sailors and pay the Mindel Chamber of Commerce the cost of a cog, a total of £1,760, for the ransom. They requested a face-to-face meeting with Lorraine. Moderate bargaining was a reasonable demand among the nobility, especially since the other party allowed the Drake Chamber of Commerce to choose the negotiation venue. Carmen, on behalf of Lorraine, made a decision, selecting the island of Guernsey in the Strait of Dover as the venue for the negotiations. This small island, nestled just off the French coast and a royal possession of King George III, enjoyed the protection of the Royal Navy but lacked a permanent military presence, making it a suitable location for negotiations. 3 days later, they would meet at Lord Code's seaside castle, perched on a cliff on the west side of the island, to engage in friendly discussions on whether Mr. Attring Dessay should be considered a pirate or noble. 3 days passed in a flash, and the First Fleet arrived at Guernsey's west coast dock, encountering a massive galleon. It was a standard naval rank V destroyer, 40 meters long and 10 meters wide, with a mainmast 28 meters high and fully square-rigged. This was perhaps the type of ship Lorraine was most familiar with, as the HMS Heir Apparent, where he had served for 6 months during naval exercises, was a rank V destroyer. It had 2 watertight compartments, a gun deck, and a main deck. Divided by the main deck, the forecastle was 2 stories down and 1 story up, while the poop was 3 stories down and 3 stories up. The total number of decks, 7. Judging by the data, it only had 1 more watertight compartment and 1 upper deck than the brigantine, but the difference in combat effectiveness between the two was profound. It was not a merchant ship, nor a high-speed craft, but a true warship built from the ground up for battlefield use. Military grade, expensive timbers were primarily elm, oak, or teak, century-old wood. The dense, thick wood was both highly waterproof and resilient enough to withstand bombardment. The 2 watertight compartments provided it with exceptional load-bearing and balance capabilities. The gun deck was equipped with 20 18-pound long-range guns, and the main deck with 12 12-pound long-range guns. The aft guns were arranged in 2 stacks, 2 on top and 4 below, all 12-pound short guns. 2 bow guns, 1 on each side, were highly capable 12-pound medium guns, each with excellent pursuit capabilities. Lorraine spotted the bow figure beneath the bowsprit between the 2 bow guns, a proud reindeer with antlers as long as a tree fork. It immediately matched Carmen's intelligence. It was the Reindeer, a retired 5th-class destroyer from the French Navy, the crown jewel of the Dessay Chamber of Commerce and the flagship of its First Fleet. The crew of the Papillon stood silently behind Lorraine, watching the massive warship, its full complement of limbs, pass before them, mooring and entering port ahead of the others. Cren's voice was hoarse. "Dessays, are those French guys planning to send their treasures to Cantabria? We wiped out their 3rd Fleet. It's not surprising that they would bite when they are desperate, but," Cren took a deep breath, "Captain, the 9-pound cannon can't penetrate our hull, and the 18-pound cannon only needs 1 shot to open a big hole in our thickest side. How to attack? This is not something we need to consider," Lorraine said in a low voice. "We are different from other chambers of commerce. Our merchant ships have completely withdrawn from Cantabria. The destroyer is fully equipped with sails, with a maximum speed of 10 knots and 2 knots against the headwind. Generally speaking, she can't catch up with our First Fleet, which is full of high-speed ships. The only way is to run, for now, This is the only way. Lorraine stared at the sail shadow that was gradually sinking on the sea level, with a maximum crew of 250 people and a side height 2 meters higher than the brigantine. These 2 points alone make her not a match for our family. Bravery also requires time. Chapter 46 Barbarians. At night, the carriage slowly pulled up to Sir Corder's cliff castle. The castle was small, only about 10 meters high and covering an area of 400 to 500 square meters. It was square with towers on all 4 corners. It stood on a steep cliff that jutted out from the island, facing the sea on 3 sides, with only one side less than 30 meters wide. Standing on the cliff, the moon seemed particularly large, the castle seemed particularly high, the waves crashing against the shore below, and huge rocks pressing down before one, giving one a great sense of intimidation. Lorraine saw Carmen, who had been waiting for a long time, outside the castle's drawbridge. She was wearing a dark purple lace dress with gold trim and white gauze, which was obviously custom-made in the style of the pansy merchant flag. Lorraine nodded slightly and bent his elbow to invite her. She lifted the hem of her skirt and knelt to bow, then pulled it up and leaned close to Lorraine's ear as if to be intimate. President, the Desai Chamber of Commerce has temporarily replaced the negotiator. Vice President Iris B. can't come, so he's replaced by Admiral Velen of the First Fleet. They both have the last name Desai. Temporarily. Lorraine was slightly surprised. Yes, temporarily. We haven't been informed in any way. According to etiquette, you can refuse the meeting. Why refuse? Carmen bit her lip and stood on tiptoe, almost touching Lorraine's ear. I heard. Velen is arrogant, very arrogant, having an arrogant man to negotiate. Lorraine's lips curled up into a smile. That's perfect. We don't really need the £2,000 ransom. I prefer to stand on the side of justice, to judge a pirate, rather than capture a noble. Accompanied by Carmen, Lorraine climbed the damp, spiral stone staircase to the large terrace on the 2nd floor of the castle. This was the negotiation venue, facing west, seaward, with sheer cliffs in front and behind, and the endless Strait of Dover beyond. In the center of the terrace stood a long table, covered with a dark blue flannel tablecloth. It was bare except for a stern young man in a tuxedo sitting on the south side, and 2 burly men standing with their arms clasped behind their backs and chests puffed out, swords at their waists. Lorraine's smile widened as he pulled out a chair for Carmen on the north side of the table and sat opposite the young man, his umbrella resting against his side. He crossed his legs comfortably and said, Admiral Varen Desaux, you sit facing France, yet you don't adorn your formal attire with bird feathers. Varen drooped his eyelids. Full formal attire is a sign of respect for your noble lineage. Against an English pirate who makes his living by plundering, formal attire is sufficient. That's a bit unreasonable. It was your Chamber of Commerce that flew the pirate flag and plundered English merchant ships on public routes, and now you accuse me of being a pirate. Is this the manners of a French gentleman? Varen raised his head slightly, his light blue eyes revealing undisguised disdain. I've investigated you, Lorraine Arthur Drake, a descendant of the pirate Drake, a half-blood, an illegitimate child. Half a year ago, he was still a black market trader in Elgin. Half a year later, he finally scraped together £1,000 to register with the Chamber of Commerce. You're just a small figure. Miss Carmen described you as arrogant. Lorraine leaned back in his chair and licked his lips. I think she's wrong. You're not arrogant, you're just stupid. Oh, a small figure defeated your 3rd Fleet and captured your cousin? Cousin? Or brother? You begged me not to try him for piracy, and I accepted, so I came here. And you don't seem to know why you came here. I always know what I'm going to do. Barbarian. Velen stood up, and with a ding, a gold Louis popped out and landed right in front of Lorraine. There's no such fool as Atrin in Desai's bloodline, and Desai's reputation cannot be defamed. This is your travel expenses. If you make it out alive tonight, you can hang Atrin. Next time we meet in Cantabria, I'll personally settle £100 for you as your reward. He gave Lorraine a gentleman's salute, laughed heartily, and walked into the secluded castle. Carmen watched in amazement as Velen left, then in amazement as the 2 burly men who remained grinned and drew their swords, then in amazement as Lorraine stood up and, expressionless, lifted the long-handled umbrella leaning against the side. The last time I fought in formal attire was in Bermeo. Fortunately, I remembered to order an umbrella sword from Mr. Martini. Clang. The umbrella sword was unsheathed. A moment later, Lorraine, his face stained with blood, smiled as he walked out of the castle, holding the terrified Carmen by his arm. To his surprise, Velen, A barbarian in savage skin had actually remembered to drive away his hired carriage and replace it with a dozen sleazy tour guides dressed as sailors. Lorraine, helpless, sighed as he unbuttoned his tuxedo, solemnly handing it to Carmen. "Carmen, stand back a little. I don't like blood on my clothes," the sailors shouted and rushed forward. Setups, assassinations, ambush. Cliff Castle and the West Coast docks were separated by over 10 kilometers, the road crisscrossed by dense forests and sparsely populated cliffs. From time to time, assassins would emerge from the shadows and attack Lorraine. These sailors, capable only of physical strength, were hardly a threat to Lorraine, but he was consumed by anxiety. Parasol and sword in hand, he hurried faster and faster, leading Carmen. Carmen could hardly keep up. "President, wait!" With a startled cry, Lorraine suddenly lifted her up and began to run. He held her with his left arm, his sword in his right, using the height difference and his sturdy arms to keep her half sitting, half leaning on him, as he broke into a run. Carmen felt like she was being kidnapped by a horse. The shadows of the trees on either side receded rapidly, and her body rose and fell with Lorraine's steps. To keep from falling, she clung to Lorraine's neck with all her might, practically collapsing against him. Her face flushed, and in a whisper, she said, "President, I can do it myself." "You're too slow," Lorraine said bluntly, stretching her arms and hugging Carmen tighter. "Velen is a lunatic. I'm worried about the Papillon. He dares to attack an English merchant ship in a port protected by the British Royal Navy. I'm not afraid of 10,000, I'm just afraid." As she spoke, a sailor leaped from a nearby tree fork, knife raised high, and slashed at Carmen in Lorraine's arms. Lorraine had no time to dodge, and he forced himself to the side, taking the blow on his back. Puff! The blade tore through his vest and shirt, leaving a long wound on his back. Bright red blood instantly stained half his clothes in the blink of an eye. Lorraine frowned, took a half step forward, then spun back and lunged. The slender parachute pierced the sailor's throat, nearly severing his head with a single swing. Carmen panicked. "President, your wound?" Screaming won't stop the bleeding or the pain. Lorraine gritted his teeth, forcing himself forward. "If you're afraid, just close your eyes." They marched, killing as they went. In just 10 kilometers, Lorraine, holding Carmen in his arms, slaughtered over 20 people, even taking an accidental stab wound to the back. After more than 2 hours of running, they finally saw the first fleet, moored quietly at the dock, just outside the harbor. Everyone was safe. Lorraine breathed a sigh of relief, the exhaustion of a night of fighting and the pain in his back all coming together, nearly causing him to fall. His grip on Carmen loosened. Carmen landed, hurriedly holding him. With immense effort, she carried the bleeding Lorraine back to the Papillons, facing the stunned gazes of the entire crew. Chaos erupted on the deck. Hannah leaped to catch Lorraine, her emerald eyes brimming with murderous intent. She stared at Carmen. "What's going on, Velen?" "Velen de say is a madman. He's arranged for many people to rob and kill us along the way. The president is trying to protect me." "Hannah," Lorraine suddenly spoke up, "issue the order, have Ramos take command immediately." He leaned weakly against Hannah, shaking his head weakly to clear his head. "Tell Ramos, the fleet must stay offshore, not in port. The lookout must be manned all night. Be careful of Velen's reindeer. Get through tonight and wait for dawn, quietly. Give your favorite children a thumbs up." Chapter 47 Who Destroyed Who? Southampton, Drake Chamber of Commerce. Acheron, his neck hunched, was escorted by the stern-faced Hannah all the way to Lorraine's bedroom. This was unusual. Aristocratic bedrooms were important private spaces, imbued with special family attributes. Aside from immediate family members and servants, well-educated, unmarried women typically only entertained close friends in their bedrooms, while men rarely entertained anyone there. Lorraine was undoubtedly well-educated. After being captured on the battlefield, Acheron was carefully housed in a small, rented manor on the outskirts of the city. He was well-fed and well-drunk daily, with breakfast, lunch, and afternoon tea, fine wine and snacks, a dedicated chef, and a slightly older maid. He was even allowed to ride his horse on the manor lawn. As a captive noble, Acheron's treatment was impeccable, and this impeccable treatment itself was a testament to Lorraine's upbringing. But how could such a well-educated gentleman make such a huge social blunder? As he hesitated, Hannah impatiently passed Acheron, pushed the door open, and said coldly, "Come in." Acheron hurried in like a grandson. After entering, he first went to the private study. Acheron thought Lorraine might meet him there, But upon entering, he found it still empty. Hina then pushed open the bedroom door. Atrin's eyes widened in disbelief. Mr. Drake wants to see me in the bedroom, enter or die? Atrin shuddered. Of all the members of the Drake merchants, he feared Hina the most, ever since the first day he was captured. This was partly due to the red velvet throwing knife that had brushed against his earlobe, but even more so, it was the way Hina looked at people. With only a few exceptions, she rarely looked away from the four vital points, the center of the eyebrow, the throat, the heart, and the groin, each a fatal strike. He had no doubt that Hina would betray the honor of nobility and crush him to death. Her skin color and clothing proved that the rules of the Catholic world held no sway for her. Atrin submitted to Hina's tyranny without a word. He walked in with his head held high, knocked on the door with the utmost courtesy, and asked softly, Mr. Drake, it's me. Hina kicked him in, and the door closed with a snap. Atrin took some time to adjust to the sudden change in light, until he could see the pattern of the carpet clearly, then he looked up. The people in the room were much more unexpected. Lorraine was leaning against the head of the bed, wrapped in bandages all over his body, his face pale. On his left sat Noah, who was wearing a floral dress with wide sleeves, and on his right sat Carmen, who was wearing a light blue dress. Roma people look nothing like Castilians, but Carmen is of Moorish descent and happens to have the same black hair and black eyes as Noah. Now in the dim light of the room, they look like a pair of beautiful and dazzling sisters. Kren and Ramos were also in the room, standing on either side of the bed. One of them, carelessly, rested his hand on the French officer's sword he'd seized from Atrin, while the other simply leaned his ever-present hammer on the ground. This scene frightened Atrin somewhat. With the exception of Lorraine, everyone before him wore hatred on their faces and anger in their eyes, as if they would devour him alive with just the right excuse. What a story. Lorraine gave a weak laugh. I'm sorry, Mr. Desakes, I'm not that weak. It's just that my companions insisted I stay in bed because we have to go out to sea in 3 days. Are you injured? Yes, thanks to you. Your family refused to ransom you and ambushed about 30 people at the meeting site. Lorraine thought for a moment. Again, I'm sorry, I killed a lot of people last night, and I can't count them all at once. 30 people. Atrin was stunned. He took small steps back, but he felt something pressing against his waist. When he turned around, he found that Pierce was behind him at some point. The anger on his little face was even greater than that of the people in the room. He was holding his ivory musket and aiming at his heart from behind. Judging from the state of the trigger, the gun is loaded. Atrin swallowed hard. Mr. Drake, has there been any misunderstanding? The family will definitely redeem me. My bloodline and my skills are very important to the family. They will never give up on me. It seems that you overestimate yourself, and I overestimate you too. Lorraine laughed at himself. Your family refuses to recognize you, then according to the rules of privateering, I will hand you over to the patrol court in the name of pirates, and they will choose a suitable reef as your... Wait, Atrin seemed to suddenly think of something, and shouted tremblingly, Mr. Drake, can I ask, is it the family, the Chamber of Commerce, or the fleet that is negotiating with you on behalf of the family? Lorraine frowned slightly. It is the admiral of the first fleet of your Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Verinder say, it's him. It's Verin. Seeing Atrin's unbelievable look, Lorraine became interested for no reason. I wonder if you and the other Mr. Desakes, Mr. Drake, is your ship short of a gunner? I have a service record as the gunnery commander of the HMS a third-class ship of the French Channel Fleet. I am excellent and obedient, and I hope to redeem myself, under your command. Lorraine suddenly smelled the smell of dog blood. As Atrin rambled on and on, the grudge between him and Velen was soon revealed to Lorraine and his sailors. Waylon and I are both peripheral descendants of the Desakes family. Our families both live in Senan County and Bordeaux and are neighbors. I was even born only 3 days earlier than him. Although we are peripheral descendants, because our family is in business, our families also do some small businesses. My family sells candles and his sells lamp oil. They are small business families, neither poor nor rich. It is enough to provide children with food and clothing, and even send us to church schools. We went to the same church school and had excellent grades. We shared the top 2 in every subject, and because of this, we were noticed by the family and were arranged to enlist in the French Naval Academy together. I was in the artillery department and he was in the command department. At the Naval Academy, I was the first in the artillery department at the same time, and he was the first in the command department. We went to the ball together and fell in love with a girl, Sophie Labrid, and pursued her at the same time. I won, Gatrin said proudly. I took the beautiful girl's first kiss and virginity. From then on, he hated me. We graduated at the same time with the highest grades in each subject and joined the Navy. Because of our outstanding performance, we were promoted repeatedly and were successively accepted into the family's heir sequence. I was the 39th in line and he was the 40th. This is the second reason why he hated me. After many twists and turns, we were assigned together again. On the third-class battleship HMS of the Strait Fleet, I was the lieutenant commander, chief gunner, and he was the lieutenant colonel, second mate. He started to retaliate against me. Hatred showed on Yatrin's face. He used various methods to exclude me and discredit me. He finally forced me out of the Navy and sent me to the family's Chamber of Commerce to serve as captain of the Far Light, who knew that a year later, he would also leave the army on his own initiative and become the captain of the family's flagship, the Reindeer. He completely ruined my life. At this point, Yatrin was furious. Mr. Drake, he is my lifelong enemy. He has been making things difficult for me all his life. Now he is taking revenge and wants to kill me. I want revenge. I want to kill him. I am willing to make a deal with the devil as long as I can kill him. Please take me in. The melodramatic story ended abruptly, leaving Lorraine with mixed feelings. Was his ship short of a gunner? No. After Ramos' transfer to the Cat's Tail, the Cat's Tail lacked a qualified gunner to command its artillery, and the need was urgent. Was Atrin's resume impressive? Excellent. The French Naval Academy's educational level was slightly inferior to that of the Plymouth Naval Academy, but it was still world-class. To have achieved first place there and subsequently become a gunner on a third-class ship was a testament to his professional excellence. The problem was that his method of joining was a bit too bizarre. Could it be that Atrin was actually a trap set by the Desai Chamber for Drake? A spy? Lorraine almost laughed at himself. Putting aside the complex and awkward undercover procedures, how could the Desai Chamber have known Lorraine Drake's identity before the Battle of Belle Isle? The key point was that even if Atrin's original intention wasn't to be a spy, that didn't mean he was loyal to the Drake Chamber. How to test his loyalty? Or rather, a way out. Lorraine's eyes lit up. Ms. Sophie Labrid, she's the starting point of all your feuds with Varen, right? Your memory is amazing, Yatrin complimented quickly. What happened to her later? I mean, did you get married, huh? Yatrin was stunned for a moment, his face full of surprise. Why would I marry her? Yatrin shook his hand with a look of disdain. Sir, marriage is the enemy of romance, the grave of love. Only old-fashioned people like Varen regard marriage as everything. I only pursue love. Lorraine finally understood. So, you broke up. Yes, we broke up, but the story doesn't end there. 3 years later, she married Varen. At the church ceremony, I saw her in her white wedding dress, and suddenly I found a taste of love again. Yatrin looked excited. You know what? I started pursuing Sophie again, and it only took 6 months to succeed. She divorced Villain and got back together with me. We spent 3 wonderful months like a honeymoon. Lorraine looked puzzled. That was when I was in the Navy, and you hadn't even gone to the HMS yet, had you? How did you know? Atrin said in surprise. I guessed. Lorraine licked her lips. Excuse me, has Mr. Villain Desai ever remarried? No. How could a boring person like him know the beauty of pursuing love? Do you really think he ruined your life? Yes, he ruined my life, Atrin said firmly. I hate him to the core. Okay. Lorraine pulled out a punched gold Louis from his collar, his expression uneasy. Because you won the great battle for love, congratulations, you're accepted, Chief Gunner. Mr. Atrin Desai. Chapter 48 Sea Rescue. Atrin was a scumbag. Whether viewed according to the Eastern, commoner ideals of love embraced by Lorraine in his previous life or the English, gentlemanly ideals of love embraced in this one, there was no doubt about that. But that wasn't enough reason for Lorraine to refuse him aboard. This horny beast was a good gunner and a good seaman, and he had a deep grudge against Velen, making it impossible for him to return to the Desai Chamber of Commerce before Velen's death. In the short term, he was loyal. Such a seaman was hard to find for Lorraine. Furthermore, he didn't ask for money. The seaman's agreement between the two parties included a clause regarding redemption. During his 2-year tenure with the Drake Chamber of Commerce, Gatrin Desai must redeem himself through loyalty, bravery, obedience, and hard work, which lasted until September 30, 1780, After the expiration of the clause, the Drake Chamber of Commerce reserves the right to renew or terminate his contract based on his performance during the redemption period, and Gatrin Dese has the right to decide whether to accept the contract. With these two clauses, Atrin became a top-tier seaman of unparalleled quality and value. As for Velen was a pitiful man. It was most likely Atrin who ruined his life. It was Atrin's fault that he had transformed from the simple-minded and talented young man he once was into the thug-like admiral he was now. But that had nothing to do with Lorraine. Lorraine wasn't a therapist or a relationship hotline. She had no obligation to offer him life counseling. All Lorraine needed to consider was how to end his life. That question remained unanswered. After 3 days of bed rest, thanks to the meticulous care of Henna, Noah, and Carmen, and the unparalleled resilience of his whaler bloodline, Lorraine's injuries had healed by 7 points, and the First Fleet was ready to set sail again. To Georgian. Thanks to the fleet restructuring and the establishment of the transfer fleet, the First Fleet's efficiency on the Cantabrian route had increased again, with a maximum one-way speed dropping from 3.5 days to 2.5 days, a round trip of 5 days. Lorraine still set the travel time at 7 days. This allowed the fleet to enter and exit the port more smoothly, and the sailors could rest and recuperate for a full day in Southampton, fully relieving the fatigue of the journey. This abundant energy greatly enhanced the sailors' responsiveness, and chemistry gradually emerged. The two young women of the Drake family became increasingly harmonious during the voyage, leaving behind an increasingly smooth and rounded trajectory. However, while the Drake Chamber of Commerce was improving, the situation in Cantabria was deteriorating. Varon and his Dese Chamber of Commerce's First Fleet made a high-profile arrival at the port of La Rochelle, France. Comprising a galleon-class destroyer, 2 brigantine-class high-speed craft, and 2 mixed-rigged schooner-class ships for combat support, they possessed a total of 96 guns. They slashed across the center of the shipping lanes, like a long-starved shark, striking from all sides across the vast sea, leaving wrecks and the bodies of British sailors strewn everywhere they passed. The British Chamber of Commerce, suffering heavy losses, swiftly launched a bloody revenge against the French merchant ships. Small and medium-sized merchant houses fled, and the Cantabrians were ablaze with war. On his weekly voyage, Lorraine could clearly sense the desolation of the entire shipping route. Black marketeers flying no commercial flags were now a rare sight at sea, and even broad-bottomed cargo ships flying British and French flags were becoming increasingly rare. Instead, boxes and barrels drifted along the waves, along with planks, masts, floating corpses, fireworks, and the occasional school of fish swarming the waters, vying for food. Lorraine had issued a fishing ban, but even before that order, the fleet's sailors had already stopped fishing. Even the white-eared fish had switched to fresh fish from the ice cellar. Fortunately, the Drake merchants had escaped unscathed. The fleet encountered enemy forces several times. The enemy ships were numerous, while the Lorraine ships were fast, leaving neither side with any chance to gain victory. Aside from 3 exchanges of fire with the Herrera merchants' fleet off the coast of Georgian a dozen days earlier, Lorraine had only a handful of opportunities to fire his guns. After 4 rounds of sailing, October arrived. The Mindel Chamber of Commerce had secured membership for Lorraine in the offshore guild. They were only waiting for Lorraine's return, and they were planning to hold a special welcome reception at Cambridge Business School. This marked a new milestone for the Chamber of Commerce. Lorraine was leaning against the railing, pondering his next steps, when he suddenly spotted a figure floating on the water not far away. Retreat. Disembark. Keep a lookout. Without a second thought, he issued the command. The fleet stopped in the middle of the vast ocean. Pierce, like a monkey, scurried up to the lookout to relieve the crew. Kren and 6 others disembarked in a small boat, rowing vigorously towards the figure on the surface. No one questioned Lorraine's arrangement. Rescue at sea is a humanitarian act, unrelated to the environment, the reward, or the status of the rescuer or the rescued. Everyone hopes to be rescued when in distress, and every sailor and every ship considers it a duty, even pirates. Raven of the Mindel merchants had been rescued by pirates before, by Dutch pirates who had never had much trouble with British merchants. Kren's boat paddled quickly out into the distance, struggling for a long time before only recovering a chest. They returned empty-handed, carrying the chest to Lorraine. "Captain, we're too late. I personally prepared his remains, go and rest." Lorraine regretfully accepted the chest. "Inform Ramos to lower the sail for half an hour so the waves don't disturb the deceased." "Yes." The chest contained nothing special, cash totaling £17 10 shillings, an account book, a common marine compass, a few unremarkable charts, and the captain's diary. The diary was written by Jimmy Crenn, a small Welsh merchant sailing out of Cardiff. He owned a 10-meter-long, non-standard two-masted cage schooner named the Cornucopia. The Cornucopia was only moderately effective. According to the account book, his annual revenue was approximately £800, with profits likely less than £60. This was the normal life for most small merchants, wealthier than the middle class, but far less comfortable. Like Captain Jimmy, he ultimately perished at sea. Lorraine, following the vague information in his diary, wrote down an address and a woman's name, preparing to deliver the box to the transshipment fleet. Asking old Merlin to offer his condolences. He was debating whether to include a condolence letter to comfort the woman as she began her new life, when little Pierce suddenly called out from the lookout. "Brother!" Two French Kirks at 6 o'clock, 20 kilometers away, speeding 3 knots, moving away. Kirks, Lorraine decided against writing a condolence letter. He gathered the items in the box and looked up at Noah. "How long has the moment of silence been?" 26 minutes, Noah said, absent-mindedly, tugging at his round chin, his white ears tugging at his round chin. This was a skill unique to witches. To accurately time the candles extinguishing during rituals, they could do so without any tools, their timing far more accurate than a pocket watch. Lorraine was pleased with the time. "Pierce, keep your eye on the prey. Acheron, prepare your artillery. Crenn, prepare your pirate flag. Aina, take the helm, await orders." He took a breath, then smiled and grabbed White Ears. "Noah, you're now acting admiral. Once the 30 minutes are up, command us to go hunting." "Yes," Noah beamed, nodding emphatically. "Today's events have really dampened my writing mood. No comment on this hiatus. For my last book, I aimed for over 100 views per page, and 50 or 60 per page. I couldn't get any better, right? Even when faced with the force majeure of being hospitalized for over a week, I didn't stop updating. This time, it's purely a personal matter. What's the reason to stop updating? Writers are fighting, and there are ways to fight. At least in my opinion, I write books for you. The platform doesn't read them, and neither do the people who manage them. That's my fundamental principle for updating. Why do I need to explain myself after updating so well? In this case, some good friends chose to stop writing in protest. I didn't try to dissuade them. I told them I'd maintain my pace, and they didn't try to dissuade me. This is just their own way of dealing with the situation, and it doesn't represent any particular stance. Finally, the National People's Congress is currently soliciting opinions on amendments to the copyright law, which is the hope of us writers. Although my voice may be weak, I still implore your support. Thank you. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 49 Hormone Cannon. Butterfly rudder left, cattail rudder right. Flanking, squeezing the channel, on the vast open sea west of the island of Yo, 2 brigantine-class sailboats, flying the colorful skull and crossbones, plowed the waves with their massive sails. They were chasing 2 Cock-class ships flying the French flag. Such a blatant pursuit had naturally been spotted by the Cock-class ships, but their broad, slightly sturdy bottoms and single-masted sails made them impossible to race. This was especially true in the current crosswind. Their only way to gain wind power was to maneuver, but the 2 brigantine ships, like the jaws of a giant beast, were forcing their course ever straighter and straighter. The space for maneuvering dwindled, their sails becoming less and less efficient. They could also hear the tall young admiral, upwind, issuing new orders to the pirate fleet. Forced landing. Permission granted, the densely packed gun ports opened from the inside. Acheron, one eye closed, gave a thumbs up from behind a 9-pounder. "Bombarding is the second most romantic thing after picking up girls, gentlemen," he said to the gunners standing behind him. "I know the English gunners are well trained. We fire 2 rounds, and you can often fire 3, and your ships are even faster. But why can't England rule the world? It's because you're not romantic enough." He narrowed his eyes, stretched his arms, and stood rooted to the heaving gun deck, his feet motionless. Wind speed, direction, force, fire and time, aiming target, everything must be considered. Just like picking up a girl, you have to know her preferences, Her upbringing, her fears and loves, then you can hide her with one strike, straight in. Fire, boom. The 9-pounder in the third compartment exploded with a roar. The red-hot shell traced a beautiful, slightly skewed arc, landing precisely on the main deck of the Coke-type guns, over 50 meters away, smashing straight through. Fire engulfed the inner deck, and the guns and explosives collapsed inward through the hole. Then, boom. Fueled by the perverse teachings of the hormone cult, Atron's first shot caused a chain reaction. The explosion erupted deep within the ship's hull, the shockwave rumbling through the center of the Kirk-class vessel. Thick columns of smoke rose into the sky, and the calm sea erupted into massive waves, so large, 5 or 6 meters high, that they nearly capsized the nearby Papalinus. Everyone, including Atron, stared at the horrific scene in amazement. Limbs, arms, whole bodies, the vast wreckage, and cargo, both crated and long since unboxed, fell like rain. The gunners' faces were filled with awe. "Captain, are all the French as skilled at artillery as you?" "Ahem," Atron coughed. "Well, land on deck. 4 romantic gentlemen, we only care when a woman gets into bed, not why she gets there." Yes, the battle ended so abruptly. Their trapped companions were sinking hopelessly not far away. The wails of sailors echoed from the depths of the whirlpool. The captain of the surviving Coke-class vessel, upon hearing them, immediately decided to raise the white flag, lower the sails, and surrender. Atron's hormone cannon had performed a remarkable feat. As the battlefield entered its inventory phase, Ramos ordered his third mate to lead the sailors aboard the surrendered ships, who soon returned with news to Lorraine. According to the captain's account, they were actually 2 transshipment vessels that had inadvertently drifted far from the coastline while chasing the wind. Their holds were filled with porcelain and embroidery from the east, worth over 13,000 pounds in total. Lorraine felt as if she was in a cloud. 10,000, 3,000 pounds. Excluding the captured ships and charts, which couldn't be exchanged for money, the General Chamber of Commerce's profits last month were over 4,000 pounds, and the month before that, less than 2,000 pounds. This suggests that with the Drake Chamber of Commerce's current shipping capacity and channels, 2,000 pounds is a normal monthly profit for the Chamber of Commerce. To earn 13,000 pounds by his own skill, Lorraine would have had to spend a full 6 months navigating the Cantabrian route in fear. And now, half of them were on the captive ship, half were at sea. The black smoke and traces of war drifting across the sea weren't just columns of gold, but time, more ships, bigger guns. Ultimately, it was all gold. Lorraine's eyes welled up. "Order, fleet, anchor down. Pansy, level 1 alert. Cat's tail, lower all crew, take up the captive ship, and count the cargo." He took a deep breath. "Tell Ramos that Njord doesn't need porcelain and silk. All that's floating on the sea is ours." Following Lorraine's orders, Drake's 2 beauties anchored in this perilous waters, lowered sails, and the anchor chain reached the seafloor, nearly 70 meters below. Cat's Tail completely abandoned its combat readiness. Besides the 20 or so sailors who remained to maintain the ship's stability, 30 men landed on the captive ship and unsheathed a dozen ropes, nearly tying the captured Coke and Cat's Tail together. Over 20 men in assault boats fanned out across the vast sea to salvage the lost cargo. Sailors swam directly to nearby cargo, each piece brought back to the ship like a sea lion scooping up a ball. On the Cat's Tail, the situation was quite different. Henna climbed the foremast lookout to monitor the southwest, while Pierce stood on the mainmast lookout, looking northeast. All gun ports were open, all guns loaded. Lorraine personally steered the wheel, and even the sailhands gripped the rigging tightly, their attention fixed on their positions. Everyone's heart was in their throat, pounding like a deer. Faster, faster. This place was right next to the main Cantabrian Channel. Robbing a barge in such a dangerous place was like overturning an armored car on the highway. While they were collecting the cash, any passing car could kill them. Reason constantly urged Lorraine to give up everything and remain agile. Money was more important than life. The sentimental villain scoffed at him, wondering if people could act according to reason. How could the word lucky ever be invented? The two villains began to argue, a quarrel that burned Lorraine's mind for 2 hours. The salvage was not yet complete. Over 6,000 pounds of cargo were piled on the captured ship. Another 4,000 pounds of soggy cargo lay scattered on the deck of the Cat's Tail, and nearly 3,000 pounds of cargo still bobbed in the sea. The salvaging boats were rowing further and further away, and the swimming sailors were slowing down. "Oh my God," Pierce suddenly screamed. "Reindeer! Reindeer spotted at 12 o'clock, full sail, full speed. He yanked off his turban, lost his grip, and watched it flutter away. Wind due south, force 6. A stroke, he muttered, his voice rising as he shouted towards the stern. Brother. 18 kilometers away, Reindeer expected to arrive in an hour. Listening to Pierce's screams, Lorraine turned stupidly, staring at the north horizon, devoid of any sail. Is this a lesson? Greed is always better than failure, he gritted his teeth. Signal. Tell Ramos to abandon the captured ship and retrieve the sailors immediately. Ask him how long it will take. Ramos immediately replied, 45 minutes. I'll give him 50 minutes. Move as much as you can from the captured ship's cargo hold. All sailors, take back the cat's tail, and then, flee to Bilbao. A bad premonition surged in the hearts of the sailors. Kren asked on behalf of everyone, what about us? Lorraine took 2 quick breaths. The Reindeer is running too fast. If we want the cat's tail to escape successfully, we have to pull her back. Kren's eyes widened. Pull the back of a destroyer, the adventure begins, my friend. Lorraine smiled bitterly, and while laughing, he ordered, changing the Chamber of Commerce flag, weighing anchor. Chapter 50, Fighting Against Iraq with an Egg. Beep. 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 Sharp whistles echoed across the sea. Huge lanterns hung from the bow and stern. Semaphore sailors frantically waved colorful flags over the side of the ship. All of this conveyed the same message. Abandon everything and return to the ship. No one knew what was happening, yet at the same time, everyone knew what was happening. The Papillon was underway. Square sails furled, fore and aft sails full, bowsprit hoisted, and the trolley sail swung high. Henna swung from the foremast to the mainmast like a lynx. Pierce and Noah, clutching White Ear, quickly scrambled into the ship's sturdiest stern gun compartment. Kren, clutching his toolbox, shouted. Acheron, his face pale, waved his hand, demanding that all the gunners take their positions. At the wheel, Lorraine took the helm himself. The Papillon was underway, heading north against the wind. With unparalleled courage, she cut a zigzag line into the wind, her speed approaching the headwind from the very start. Every sailor cursed. They cursed loudly, and the louder they cursed, the more they laughed. Let's kick the destroyer's ass, kick the destroyer's ass. Men, the goddess of victory wears white lace pantyhose, long live lace, long live Great Britain, run, men. Curses and blessings mingled as the pansy rushed forward, the waves breaking out into a majestic song, surging and carrying far with the sea breeze. Rule, Britannia. Rule the sea. Warriors of Britain, never be slaves. The sailors scattered at sea stared blankly at the pansy flag drifting further and further away. Beep. Beep. The sharp whistle of return, growing increasingly anxious. The pansy, sailing with inflated sails, sailed across the blue sea, crashing into the waves head-on, its slender bow rising high, then crashing down. Henna lowered her telescope, leaning on the lookout, and shouted to Lorraine. The Reindeer remains at the same position. 10 o'clock, 5 kilometers away, 14 knots relative speed. Lorraine immediately turned hard left. The massive underwater stern rudder slowly shifted with the steering wheel, causing the pansy to change direction, arcing and cutting into the wind to the left. Lorraine held the wheel steady, breathing softly. 10 minutes until contact. I'll make one final turn, allowing the pansy to slip past the Reindeer's bow and face directly to the port side. Kren and Acheron, standing beside Lorraine, shuddered. Kren, I hope you've prepared enough planks and glue. The waterline is our lifeline, and nothing can happen to it. 20 good guys, I'll lead them myself, Kren declared solemnly. If all else fails, we can still seal the hatches. I've checked, and the cabins are airtight. Seal the hatches, and you're dead. Lorraine gripped the handle tightly. You're not allowed to seal the hatches. Yes. You're not allowed to seal the hatches. Kren pounded his chest and rushed downstairs. Acheron swallowed hard. I'm here. 9-pounders are no threat to destroyers. This time, your battle is on the main deck. I need an angle. I'll give it to you, but not for long. A little while, enough. Acheron took a deep breath. It often takes only a moment to win a lady's heart. That's something every romantic should know. Honestly, I've suddenly gained a bit of confidence. Lorraine released the buckle and, with all his might, steered hard to starboard. Reindeer, here we come. A massive mast appeared on the horizon. On the northern horizon, the massive mast, carrying the pirate flag, rose, starting with a thin slender hull and growing thicker. The flag featured a conventional white skull. Below the skull were two azure ribbons intersecting in an X shape, embroidered with a golden bourbon sword flower, 3 on each side. Beneath the flag were taut cables, and below that, a bowl-shaped observation tower. Below the observation deck were the first, second, and third masts. Between the masts bulged a vast, pure white sail, 4 mainmasts, 3 fore and aft masts. There were also bowsprit, tarpaulins, and aft stern sails. With a tailwind and at 10 knots, the Reindeer's massive, towering hull, bow-raised, leaped out of the horizon, slamming into the sea like a mountain collapsing, sending monstrous waves soaring 4 or 5 meters into the air. Wearing the navy blue windbreaker that symbolized an admiral, Velen folded his arms at the bow, sneering as he watched the approaching papalinas, the thinning column of smoke in the distance forming a backdrop. In the eyes of barbarians, stupidity is always mistaken for courage, Admiral, his first mate reminded softly. They are at the T-head. I suggest cutting the wind appropriately and preparing the port side for battle. The port side does need to be prepared for battle, and so does the starboard side. Velen curled his lips, but the Reindeer does not need to cut the wind. If she dares to stop at the T-head, we will smash her. Yes, 3 kilometers, 2 kilometers, 1 kilometer. The iris cut through the bow of the Reindeer, and the Reindeer's 12-pound bowgun fired first. Boom. Boom. White smoke spread, and red-hot solid iron bullets flew out from the high bow, drawing a high arc, smashing into huge waves 100 meters away from the iris. The iris cut through the waves. The battle begins. Ready, Lorraine jerked the steering wheel, steering the pansy closer to the Reindeer's port side. Henna. How's Ramos? No sail. Henna, on the lookout, quickly tightened the sling around her waist. The boat hasn't returned to the ship yet, damn it. Everyone, cut broadside. Cut broadside. Port to port, bows brushing against bows, 100 meters of water between them. Artillery fire from both sides blazed in quick succession. Boom. Boom 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 boom. Lorraine turned the rudder hard to starboard. Huge sprays of water erupted around both ships. The pansy suddenly lurched outward, the waves pushing it to a nearly 10-degree list. Lorraine pressed the steering wheel and roared, Acheron, boom. The 6-pounder Acheron himself fired with a roar. Hundreds of pellets raining down, creating a massive white cap 20 meters from the Reindeer. Shotgun shells can't reach that far. Doesn't your slutty goddess know how to cheat? Lorraine gritted her teeth, steering left. The Papilio Bloom turned back and closed in, cutting within 80 meters of the Reindeer at the stern, the two closing in. Boom, boom, boom. The second volley rang out, the Reindeer's heavy guns roaring down on all sides of the Papilio Bloom. The Papilio Bloom's 9-pounder scored a lucky hit, its fist-sized iron shell piercing the hull, leaving only a charred mess. Acheron reloaded his guns at top speed, but he held his thumbs up, never attempting to fire. His face flushed, and he blurted out, I want elevation. Elevation. Don't you Englishmen understand English? I'm a ship. Lorraine shouted back at the top of his lungs. Not the damn Enterprise? What's the Enterprise? NCC 1701. You know nothing. Amidst the exchange of insults, the Papilio Bloom crossed paths with the Reindeer again, slicing through the Reindeer's waterline at the stern at a distance of 40 meters. The Reindeer's stern gun roared. Boom 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 boom. Lorraine gasped in shock. Direct hit? He had barely finished his words when a red-hot projectile slammed directly into the bow of the Iris. The Scott crossbow on the upper deck was shattered, a large hole blasted through the empty bowgun bay. Flames shot up into the sky, igniting the bowsprit hanging high above. Put out the fire. Protect the bowsail, Lorraine shouted as he pulled away from the bow. Sailors on deck, carrying buckets and sandbags, rushed to the bow. The Iris seized the opportunity to fire a third volley. 2 of the shells hit their mark, slamming 2 craters into the Reindeer's stern. Acheron, aboard the healing ship, fired a second round. With a bang, it grazed the stern sail and ignited the Reindeer's own. The distance between the two ships had widened again by 100 meters. Seeing that the fire at the bow was under control, Lorraine gasped and turned the rudder to the left. The smoking pansy drew a big arc and turned into the wind. Raise the square sail. The square sail was raised, and the distance between the two sides was 400 meters. The Reindeer, with its stern sail and tarpaulin lowered, rushed forward, and the pansy, with its sails raised high, chased after it. Henna. I want to know the situation of the cat's tail. Ramos is collecting the boats. In 15 minutes at most, They will be within the range of the reindeer. I guarantee that Virendase will not see the sale of the cat's tail. Lorraine's face was grim, and his teeth were clenched. Round 2, begin. PS The British Royal Navy Song Rule. Britannia. PS2. NCC 1701, the federal government Starship Enterprise. PS3. There are still 2 investments left, my friends. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.